Chapter 898. It was probably because this self-proclaimed Lingzhou general was too direct that Song Yan, who had been immersed in officialdom for many years, found it refreshing. At the same time, he also felt a fear that the governor did not want to admit. For a moment, he was speechless and did not make a sound. The tea had already turned cold, but Song Yan still sat there and swirled the cup lid. Su Fengnian did not care about this kind of harmless rudeness. There was a secret report that Li Fuzhen had also come to Huangnam County. He did not want to meet her. If that happened, it would be difficult for both sides, so he prepared to leave this manor that was indeed filled with a gloomy aura. Song Yan was not so conceited that he would not move from his chair. He stood up and sent him to the door. Su Fengnian told him that he would stay in the county capital until tomorrow morning. Song Yan nodded his head and stood in place for a long time before walking back to the chair with heavy steps. He gently pressed one hand on the armrest of the iron pear-wood chair. The steward who had been rejected by the honored guest of the manor carefully stood at the door. He could not help but be worried. Everyone knew that the heir of Biyao was a strange and absurd person. Now that he had placed the title of Lingzhou general on his head, who knew if he was going to openly attack Lingzhou? His master had better not be the first. Song Yan patted the armrest and turned around to say, "Go to Wild Ape House and organize 2,000 books. Then have General Tao send them to the Lingzhou general's manor today." The steward could not help but ask, "Master, how will you divide them?" Song Yan's face was filled with helplessness as if salt had been poured onto his wound. He sighed and said, "Other than the 40 or so rare books that are kept in yellow rosewood boxes, choose the best ones and move them out of Wild Ape House." The steward made a sound of acknowledgement and quickly left. Song Yan rubbed his forehead and said with a bitter smile, "It really is more painful than marrying off a daughter." Su Fengnian brought Su Yanbing and Hong Shuwen along the small path of the Song Manor. Huyen Guanyin did not enter the manor and remained in the carriage outside the manor. The reason why Su Fengnian chose Huangnam County's Song Yan was mainly because this prefect was quite knowledgeable, but he did not have the temperament of an old scholar. Back then, Song Yan had purposely criticized Su Zhao's unclear rewards and punishments in public. It was just a ploy in the officialdom to attract Su Zhao's attention. It was not really Song Yan who did not understand the rules of the officialdom. It was a pity that he met Su Zhao, the king of Biyao, who did not know how to read the customs. Of course, Su Fengnian also began to suspect that Su Zhao had intentionally left this stubborn Lingzhou rock for him to subdue. While Su Fengnian was thinking, he raised his head and saw a tall servant girl from the manor. She was dressed simply and strangely had a long sword at her waist. She had an unfriendly expression towards them. After she blocked their path, she pressed down on the hilt of her sword and asked sternly, "Who are you? You had bad intentions on the street outside earlier. Why did you barge into the backyard without permission?" Young people who did not wear armor but carried cold swords in Lingzhou were definitely those hedonistic sons who did not know the immensity of heaven and earth. She had followed the young miss and taught them a lesson countless times. These wastrels who only knew how to rely on their parents' achievements to do evil did not have any memory at all. This time, they actually dared to barge into the prefectural governor's manor to show off. Su Fengnian glanced at her. Hong Shuwen behind him was eager to try. His eyes were dark and cold, and he was about to use the scabbard to knock this girl unconscious. Su Fengnian threw a look at Hong Shuwen, indicating that he should not cause trouble. He smiled and explained to her, "I am a guest of your manor. The carriage is parked at the back door and I am about to leave. It is not what you think. Barging into an official's manor is not a small crime. I do not have the courage to come to the prefectural governor's manor to cause trouble." Su Fengnian finished speaking and was about to walk around her. He did not expect her to take 2 steps to the side and block his path again. Hong Shuwen rolled his eyes. This girl really did not know how the word death was written. The maidservant said stiffly, "No, you have to tell me your name. I'll ask the steward, and only after I confirm that there's no mistake will I let you go. Otherwise, if you're a daring book thief or a bandit who intends to commit murder," Hong Shuwen could not help but scold, "Scram." The maidservant, whose temper was not much better than Hong Shuwen's, was furious and wanted to draw her sword. However, what scared her out of her wits was that no matter how much strength she used, her sword could not leave the scabbard. It was as if it was nailed to the scabbard. Su Fengnian knew that Hong Shuwen did not have this ability, but to Su Yanbing, who had once suppressed Wang Xiu, it was just a small trick. Su Fengnian directly brushed past her. Su Yanbing, who was as calm as an ancient well, followed closely behind. Hong Shuwen had a mischievous expression on his face as he swaggered past her. The maidservant, who had practiced swordsmanship for many years, only thought that she had seen a ghost in broad daylight. She did not dare to be rash and turned her head to look at the three people in a daze. Only when she found that they had shadows did she breathe a sigh of relief. She was really afraid that they were the wandering ghosts who had died tragically in this mansion. The maidservant no longer dared to move, but there was someone in the mansion who was still lingering around. His sword was like a rainbow as it flew straight towards them. Su Fengnian frowned. Hong Shuwen was happy that someone had bumped into his blade. However, with His Highness present, he did not act too ruthlessly. He quickly took out his blade and used the scabbard to stab the assassin's chest. Then, he kicked the man's abdomen. Hong Shuwen seemed to feel that he had let the man off easy. He quickly walked over and was about to fiercely step on the assassin's face when Su Fengnian spoke, "That's enough." Hong Shuwen took back his boots that were only an inch away from the man's face. He put on his Biyao blade again and turned around to walk towards His Royal Highness, who had a bodhisattva's heart. The maidservant, who had previously failed to draw her sword, cried out with a sobbing tone, "Miss." The maidservant, who had been poked and stepped on by Hong Shuwen, struggled to sit up. She pointed at the fallen sword to the maidservant. Then, she shouted towards the backs of the three people with difficulty, "Hey, hey, hey, the one with gray hair, don't be in a hurry to leave. I have something to ask you." Chapter 899. But to Song Huangmei's disappointment, that guy just left without looking back. She didn't know if he was afraid that her father would help her vent her anger, or he just didn't want to talk to her. But Song Huangmei, who had the spirit of the Jianghu, didn't have the thought of being unforgiving. She was in the wrong to use her sword to keep them, and she didn't think that the other party was unreasonable. Song Huangmei's skill was inferior, and she was convinced. Although Song Huangmei's face was pale from the pain, her curiosity was far greater than her anger. But the maid Iron Cliff was not so open-minded. She helped the young miss pick up the long sword, and after helping the young miss stand up, she knew that she was not the opponent of that group of people, but she still wanted to fight. Song Huangmei grabbed her arm and squeezed out a smile that was uglier than crying, "Iron Cliff, don't go. They are really guests of the house, and my father personally welcomed them." "Ouch, it hurts, I can't talk anymore." The maid Iron Cliff cried, "Young miss, how can there be such guests? I have to reason with the master." Song Huangmei, on the other hand, sucked in a breath of cold air, and smiled with satisfaction, "Iron Cliff, we finally met a master. Go, 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 help me to Sister Fusion. After I catch my breath, I will ask my father who that guy is." Su Fengnian walked to the front of the carriage and said to Hong Shuwen, "Huangnam County has a few Beimang spies that have been rooted here for many years. Seeing that you have nothing to do, you can go and work with our spies tonight, but we won't record your military merits. Remember, you have to follow their rules. If I know that you killed people, don't think about getting involved in this kind of thing in the future." Hong Shuwen nodded vigorously, his eyes were burning, and he licked the corner of his mouth with a smile that was terrifying. Guo Fufeng sat alone in front of the brazier in the room. He did not feel that he was being looked down upon. He even had the leisure to look at the decorations in the room. If he did not have such shrewdness and broad-mindedness, how could he have made Li Fujian, one of the few wealthy women in Biyao, fall in love with him? Guo Fufeng was not dissatisfied with his current situation. Guo Fufeng believed that his plan was flawless. If his brother-in-law Li Hanlin continued to be an unruly hedonist, it would be fine. Guo Fufeng had never been a rigid scholar and did not mind helping Li Hanlin do evil. Now that Li Hanlin had joined the border, it was even better. In the future, when Li Hanlin returned to his hometown with glory, he would most likely take the path of a military official. A family also had to walk on two legs. Wouldn't the path of a civil official be filled by him, the virtuous son-in-law of the Li family? The two of them helped each other. With Li Gongda, who had only been the administrator for less than 2 years, guiding him, the Li family would naturally be prosperous. Guo Fufeng even thought of the scene where he would meet the new Prince Liang in the future. Now, what was a little disdain? Even Li Fuzhen did not know that two officials highly regarded by the administrator had approached Guo Fufeng in private. They were just short of calling each other brothers. Guo Fufeng narrowed his eyes and looked at the charcoal fire in the brazier. This trip to Huangnam County was a secret. Li Fuzhen was thin-skinned and inarticulate. He still needed to rely on him to solve his father-in-law's problems. Huangnam County was the place of prosperity for the administrator. If there was a fire in the backyard, it would be a topic of ridicule in the prince's household. Guo Fufeng believed that Song Yan knew the severity of the situation. Previously, he was neither cold nor warm to him. Li Fuzhen sat down beside him. Guo Fufeng saw that there was no one around and said softly, "I have my own plans on how to persuade Sir Song. Fuzhen, you don't have to worry. Also, according to what you said, the man that Miss Song likes is a disciple of a second-rate gang in Huangnam County. If there's a chance, the four of us can find an elegant restaurant to have a meal. Although I'm not a member of the Jianghu, I know a lot of Jianghu stories. I'm not afraid to have nothing to say to that person." Li Fuzhen suddenly asked, "Fufeng, aren't you tired?" Guo Fufeng smiled and asked back, "Tired?" Li Fuzhen turned her head and did not look at him. Guo Fufeng hesitated for a moment and did not hold her hand. He placed his hands on the brazier and enjoyed the warmth. His voice was warm as he said, "There's nothing to be tired about. In order for us to have comfortable days in the future, it's natural for me to be tired. One day, I will let Lingzhou and even Beiliang remember the name Guo Fufeng." Li Fuzhen did not feel tired when she went on a hunger strike with her parents in order to be with him. She did not know why, but when she heard the bold words of the man she admired, she felt tired. Guo Fufeng said softly, "Fuzhen, don't worry. Sooner or later, I will let your father and Hanlin acknowledge me." Li Fuzhen nodded her head. Song Huangmei held his chest with one hand and his abdomen with the other. He entered the room and sat down. Li Fuzhen asked worriedly, "What's wrong?" Song Huangmei said mysteriously, "It's nothing. Didn't we see those people full of killing intent earlier? I personally went to test them. Guess what, I was taught a lesson by them. That's nothing. What happened to Iron Cliff was strange. They were not even able to draw their swords. Those people are definitely experts." Li Fuzhen asked with a panicked expression, "Does your father know about this?" Song Huangmei shook his head and said, "Not yet. When I'm not in such a sorry state, I'll go and ask. Otherwise, my father will definitely ground me for half a month. I might not even be able to go to the lantern market." Li Fuzhen, who wanted to continue hiding the truth, grabbed Song Huangmei's hand and blurted out, "The person in the lead is surnamed Su. He's the current general of Lingzhou." Song Huangmei was dumbfounded. He then shook his head and smiled, "No way. Where did Su get his killing intent from? Him? Even if he wears a Beiliang sword, he's just an embroidered pillow. Impossible. If that person is Su Fengnian, then I'm a female sword immortal." Song Yan stood behind the three of them and inadvertently heard this. For the first time, he was furious at his daughter. He said angrily, "Song Huangmei, fine, fine, fine. You're a female sword immortal, right? You'll be grounded for a year. If you dare to go out, I'll break your legs. This time, I'll do what I say." Song Huangmei shrunk her neck and asked softly, "Father, is it really that Su guy?" Song Yan said sternly, "What Su guy?" "It's His Royal Highness." It was the first time Song Huangmei saw her father scold someone with such a stern face. She did not even feel wronged when she was beaten by Hong Shuwen. Now, she was so wronged that tears welled up in her eyes. She sobbed and shouted angrily, "It's that Su guy. Even if he's standing in front of me, I'll still call him Su. He's an ignorant and incompetent second generation. If he wasn't born into a good family and followed the general's surname Su, then what is he, Su Fengnian? Outside the door, the housekeeper of the Song residence wished he could dig a hole and hide in it. He swallowed his saliva and turned his neck stiffly. He looked at the Su guy, who had left and returned. He did not know how to fix the situation for his young miss. Song Yen saw his daughter suddenly stop crying. He realized the change behind him. After he turned around, even the governor who had experienced the storms of officialdom felt his heart turn to ashes. Chapter 900. Li Fuzhen closed her eyes, as if she did not dare to face the disaster of the Song family. Su Fengnian's expression was calm, and one could not tell if he was happy, angry, or sad. He said to Song Yen, "Official Song, I have something to discuss with you." After saying that, Su Fengnian turns around and walks down the stairs. Song Yen was angry with Song Huangmei before. In the face of a disaster, he quietly presses his hand to his daughter who causes trouble from her mouth. He tries his best to squeeze out a smile, indicating that she should not panic. Turning around and stepping over the threshold, Song Yen let out a long breath, which was a bit cold. He quickly followed the Lingzhou general. Song Yen had been in a high position for a long time, and his understanding of shrewdness was much deeper than ordinary people who did not have to worry about food and clothing. Many of the sons of Jianliang were not evil people who bullied men and women. Normally, they would greet and send off people, and when dealing with officials like Song Yen, who held real power, they would be very gentle and polite. When dealing with subordinates, they would also have the ability to control people. They would pretend to be profound, and their words and actions were strange, making people afraid. However, in Song Yan's eyes, this kind of shrewdness was not a high realm. They would not be moved by interests, and they would not be affected by the ways of the world. No matter how big or small, they would be able to remain calm. This was the true shrewdness. Song Yen was afraid that Su Fengnian was the former. When things were going well, he was easy to talk to, and when doing business with people, he would be fair. However, if things did not go his way, he would show his fangs and not treat people as people. Song Yen did not think that a governor of Huangnam County could make His Royal Highness, who was Biyao, angry and not have any scruples in doing things. Su Fengnian slowed down his steps and walked side by side with Song Yen. He softly joked, "In the past, you scolded Su Shao, and now your daughter scolded me. Does the Song family have a grudge with the Su family?" Song Yen was a bit embarrassed. Su Fengnian smiled and said, "I came back this time to tell you that your daughter and a maidservant tried to stop me from leaving the manor and suffered a little. The Song family is in the wrong for this matter, but I'm afraid that when a woman holds a grudge, she will be unreasonable and talk nonsense. This will cause the governor to hold a grudge against me, so I felt the need to come back and make things clear. However, if it was just this matter, I wouldn't have bothered to make a big fuss about it. The main thing is that there are several Beimang thieves' lairs in Huangnam County that have been hidden for many years. This time, a large number of scholars are going to die, and there are many spies and men of sacrifice in disguise. Even some Beimang spies who were originally rooted in the Central Plains have begun to take the opportunity to infiltrate Biyao. Tonight, someone will clean up Huangnam County. I will leave tomorrow morning, so I felt that I needed to inform you in advance so that you won't be flustered when the time comes." When I returned to the residence, I saw that the Wild Ape House had started moving books. Song Yen didn't dare to form a grudge with the young man next to him. He didn't care about etiquette and directly asked, "Your Highness, are you really not angry at my daughter's rudeness?" Su Fengnian asked in return, "Scolding people in my own home is better than those people who stabbed me in the back in Lingzhou. I can still endure the latter and haven't made a move until now. What are you worried about? If you really feel guilty, then give me another 500 books from the Wild Ape House's collection." Song Yen sighed and said, "It was me who measured the heart of a gentleman with the yardstick of a villain." Su Fengnian said self-deprecatingly, "What kind of gentleman am I? You guys, once bitten, twice shy. Based on my bad reputation in Biyao." Song Yen suddenly turned his head and saw the administrator's daughter hurriedly running over. She stopped and looked at them without any intention of leaving. Su Fengnian hesitated for a moment and said softly, Sir Song, I want to say a few words to Miss Li. Go to the back door and wait for a moment. Song Yan nodded and left with quick steps. Li Fuzhen didn't take another step forward. With a cold expression, she asked, what do you want to do to the Song family? Su Fengnian didn't beat around the bush with her. You actually want to ask me what I plan to do to Song Huangmei, right? Don't worry, Li Fuzhen interrupted Su Fengnian's words and said with a cold smile, do you really believe that I can be at ease? Su Fengnian said calmly, Li Fuzhen, if I remember correctly, I don't owe you anything. Li Fuzhen gritted her teeth and said, if something happens to Hanlin at the border, I will hate you for the rest of my life. Su Fengnian turned to leave, but he was stopped by Song Huangmei. However, the swordswoman learned her lesson this time and said timidly, Your Highness, I will take responsibility for my own actions. Don't make things difficult for my father. Su Fengnian reached out and pinched her cheek. You scolded me, and I took advantage of you. Let's call it even. Song Huangmei was stunned on the spot. After a long time, she came back to her senses. She jumped up and ran toward Li Fuzhen, chirping like a bird. Sister Fuzhen, did you see that? His Highness really has a murderous aura. He took advantage of me, but I didn't even dare to move. If it were a normal lecher, I would have chopped off his dog's paw. Sister, you don't know, but the two retainers by his side are very powerful. I've always said that a man with a cold blade is considered handsome. Sigh, now I feel that most of the rumors are true. Sister Fuzhen, you don't practice martial arts or swordsmanship, so you don't know that there is a saying in Jianghu that His Royal Highness is definitely an expert. I just don't know if he can fly on a sword and make a sound. Su Fengnian came to the back door of the mansion. Song Yan asked softly, do you need me to do anything to clean up Huangnam County tonight? Su Fengnian shook his head and said, no need. Song Yan said, if your highness doesn't mind this mansion's lifeless atmosphere, you might as well stay here. Su Fengnian smiled and said, why? Are you afraid that I will suddenly die in Huangnam County? Song Yan, whose thoughts were exposed, laughed. Su Fengnian didn't let Song Yan see him out. He sat in the carriage and quietly drove out of the alley. Su Yanbing drove the carriage to a private mansion located in the southwest corner of the county. Su Fengnian pushed the door and entered. The small courtyard was narrow. On the cold floor, there were more than 20 people kneeling. Su Fengnian crossed his fingers and laughed at himself in his heart. Finally, he felt a little like His Royal Highness. He said a few words and stood up. These 20 or so people wore different clothes. Some wore the brocade and marten coats of the rich, while others wore the rough hemp clothes of the countryside. There was even someone who wore a jade pendant that matched the official's uniform. Su Fengnian walked over and pulled off the jade pendant. The official wasn't low either. He was a lower 9th rank official. After stealing it, he didn't rush to return the jade pendant. The leader was an average-looking woman. As soon as she stood up, she knelt down again. With an involuntary trembling voice, she carefully picked out her words and slowly reporting to your highness, according to our investigation, there are 3 Beimang spy lairs in Huangnam County. 2 of them have been operating for more than 10 years. According to General Chu's arrangements, a group of Beiliang's peregrine falcons will enter Huangnam County at 5 o'clock. Another group of Beiliang's Eagle Guard, trained as crossbowmen, will arrive at 5 o'clock. Your Highness only needs to give the order and we can uproot these 3 malignant tumors. Chapter 901. There were all kinds of Beiliang spies, but the ones who were really responsible for cleaning up were all peregrine falcons. This peregrine falcon was responsible for patrolling Beiliang. Most of them were Jianghu masters raised by the Beiliang Palace. Lu Qiantang, Xu Xiu, and the group who later intercepted and killed Prince Zhao Kai were all men of sacrifice who killed people in exchange for secret martial arts manuals and wealth. There were also some desperados who had committed capital crimes in Liang and had no choice but to rely on Beiliang to seek a chance of survival. However, the current Beiliang spies were divided into 2. Half of the power was taken from Chu Lushan's hands and fell into the hands of second commandery Princess Su Weisheng. Su Weisheng was too lazy to waste time on the old personnel, so he directly transferred nearly 100 elite crossbowmen from the Biyao army to become the Eagle Guard. They worked together with the Peregrine Falcon in name, but in reality, they were restricting each other. Therefore, the Eagle Guard swam together on the land of Biyao, choosing people to devour. As for the affairs outside the Great Wall, the old spy leader Chu Lushan still controlled most of them. Su Weisheng seemed to have no intention of meddling with them for the time being. Su Fengnian had almost no involvement in these two most filthy organizations, but he had heard about the general structure. For example, the spies in the courtyard at this time were mostly turtle fish, who were dormant in one place all year round and were not allowed to move. There were also a few herring fish, who were more flexible. They regularly returned to Jianghu and were responsible for acting as the middleman to pass on military intelligence. Many turtles died of old age without knowing the identity of their companions. It was very unusual for them to gather together like this. When they were waiting, they were told by the female spy leader, Huang Nan, nicknamed Black Carp, that a big shot from the top was coming to Huangnam County to personally set up a trap. However, almost no one thought that it would be the Crown Prince of Biyao who would come to my house, so they were a little scared for a moment. They were not commoners who only knew how to spread false information. Based on their experience and status, they had seen some secret records and heard some secrets with their own eyes. They had heard some secrets with their own ears. His Royal Highness's actions. Su Fengnian smiled and said, "Haley, stand up and speak." Originally, it was agreed that your immediate superior, Wang Tongke, would come to Huangnam County. This crown prince came up with the idea on the spur of the moment and replaced Wang Tongchue's position. Don't mind a layman telling you what to do. For tonight's operation, this crown prince will only watch from the sidelines and will not participate. The woman who had been in charge of Huangnam County's espionage operations felt relieved. She stood up and was about to say a few polite words when His Royal Highness grabbed her neck and broke it with a crack. Then, he threw her to the side with a smile on his face. Su Fengnian continued to smile and said, "I forgot to mention that Wang Tongke didn't come to Huangnam County not because he didn't want to, but because he couldn't. On the way here, he was killed by Chu Lushan's men. This Haley has been flirting with a Beimang official for many years. Huangnam County has been rotten from the beginning to the end. This crown prince knows that other than her, there are actually a few people in the courtyard who have sided with Beimang's spider web. This time, we have mobilized so many people. In the end, the ones who will die are just some insignificant minions. This won't do." The remaining people in the courtyard looked at each other in dismay. The jade turtle, who had already become a Biyao official, took a step forward and gently looked at He Li's corpse. There was a desolate smile on his face as if he had accepted his fate. Su Fengnian ignored this spy who had exposed his identity and ignored him. He walked up the steps and put his hands in his sleeves, leaving only the jade pendant dangling from his sleeves. He smiled and asked, "Is there anyone else who wants to die a quick death? If you are caught by this crown prince, you won't receive the same treatment as He Li." The courtyard was dead silent. It was obvious that no one responded to His Royal Highness' good intentions. Su Fengnian slowly said 3 names. The 3 of them were swiftly and violently cut in half by Hong Shuwen's saber. Su Fengnian said, "According to a secret report, there is a Beimang loyalist in the courtyard. His identity is unknown, but it doesn't matter. Huangnam County Spy Agency was originally going to be overthrown. In order to save time and avoid future troubles, we can only kill them all. Huangnam County is a fengshui treasure land that Beimang's spider web has worked hard to develop. This crown prince believes in that big fish. His life is more valuable than all the Biyao spies in the courtyard combined. Biyao won't lose out on this deal." A fat rich merchant was surprisingly agile. He stepped lightly on his toes and was about to jump over the courtyard wall when Hong Shuwen stabbed him in the back with a halberd. His body hung heavily on the wall. Hong Shuwen walked over and grabbed his legs and pulled him back into the courtyard. With his death, the turtles and reeds who were still standing in the courtyard breathed a sigh of relief. If this guy had refused to give himself away and insisted on implicating the rest of the spies, they could only stretch their necks and wait to be slaughtered. Otherwise, they wouldn't have dared to go against the cold-blooded Biyao crown prince. As turtles and reeds, most of them had families, old and young. If they died here today, they would be sacrificing their lives for the Biyao. If they wanted to hate someone, they could only hate those Biyao spies for being too cunning. However, after they died, their families, old and young, would still be able to live without worry. Just when everyone thought the dust had settled, Su Fengnian followed Su Yanbing's finger and stared at a middle-aged man with an old-fashioned face. This fatty is willing to die for you in order to protect you. It can be seen that your identity is not ordinary. Otherwise, if I were him, even if I were to die, I would drag the rest down with me. You're Han Shang, right? In the past, you've accomplished several great things at the border of Yuzhou. You can be considered to have made great contributions to the Biyao. These years, you've been at odds with He Li and have been ostracized by him for many years. Originally, you were the most innocent spy in the courtyard. However, do you know when you gave yourself away? Han Shang smiled gloomily and looked at Su Yanbing. I've long heard that there are hidden talents in the king's mansion. However, the king of Beiyao's earthly branch men of sacrifice have all made a move. Only a guy called Su Yanbing has been doing nothing all this time. No one can figure out his depth. The Beimang side speculated that this person's realm was higher than Spear Immortal Wang Xiu's junior brother, Han Laoshan. Now, it seems that this is indeed the case. I've clearly suppressed my heartbeat and thought that there were no flaws. I didn't expect that I would still be seen through. Unfortunately, I can't spread this news. My mistake was that I didn't expect His Royal Highness to come in person and Su Yanbing to accompany him. It wasn't that Han Shang didn't want to put up a last-ditch struggle. However, he knew that his efforts were futile when he was targeted by Su Yanbing. Han Shang's vision went black. He didn't even see how Su Yanbing attacked before he fainted. Su Fengnian threw the jade pendant back to the official and smiled. Wang Tongke, Huangnam County has made up for your mistakes. Wang Tongke took the jade pendant and wore it on his waist. Only after he tore off his mask did the people in the courtyard realize that this person was Wang Tongke, the #1 spy in Huangnam County for more than 10 years. A man whose wife and children had never seen his true face for more than 10 years. He followed His Royal Highness into the room and asked softly, Your Highness, why don't you let me continue to hide in the dark? Although Huangnam County will be much cleaner after tonight, it's hard to guarantee that there won't be any accumulation of filth in the future. Su Fengnian said, You don't have to stay in Huangnam County anymore. Say goodbye to your wife and children and then go to Yuzhou. Wang Tongke nodded and didn't have any objections. Su Fengnian suddenly said, I know that you've nurtured a disciple with a very clean background. Chu Lushan thinks highly of him. Take him to Yuzhou and work hard for a few more years to train that young man. When he takes over your mantle, you can stop being a spy and reunite with your wife and children. In the future, you can change your appearance and live a stable life. Wang Tongke, who had been honed to the point that his appearance wouldn't change even when faced with blades and axes, was stunned. Su Fengnian smiled and said, Although most people would be even more worried if I said, Don't worry, I hope that you can rest assured. Beiyaong hasn't mistreated its meritorious subjects in the past, and it won't do so in the future. The man suddenly laughed and said, I appreciate your highness's good intentions, but Wang Tongchua's life is cheap and he has long been used to scheming against others. If you suddenly ask this lowly one to plant flowers, this lowly one will feel even worse than killing this lowly one. Besides, our line of work isn't like mounting a horse to fight and killing enemies. It's useless once you're old. The older you get, the more proficient you'll be. Su Fengnian was speechless. Wang Tongke blushed for the first time and said, Your Highness, my 10-year-old son is full of admiration for your Highness after listening to the storyteller's story. This kid has been very strong since he was young and wants to go to the Phoenix Battalion to be a White Horse loyal follower. Su Fengnian nodded and smiled. Good, I'll allow him to go to the Phoenix Battalion when he's of age. Wang Tongke suppressed his excitement and said in a low voice, "Your Highness, shall we plan tonight's extermination?" Su Fengnian waved his hand and said, "Leave Han Shang to me. As for the rest, Chu Lushan's arrangements will remain unchanged. Hong Shuwen will move with you tonight. You can go about your business. The remaining people in the courtyard still need you to pacify." Wang Tongke made a sound of acknowledgement and quietly left the room. Chapter 902. In the Song Manor, Song Yan took the initiative to find Li Fuzhen and went for a walk in the manor. Song Huangmei, who had a lively personality, had experienced many twists and turns and dared to touch this bad luck. She obediently took off her sword and went to learn embroidery. Song Yan thought about it and slowly said, "Niece, let's talk about something that might be a little boring. After Uncle is done, you can go back and tell the administrator why Huangnam County has changed. Now that Lingzhou's officialdom is undergoing a drastic change, if I, Song Yan, were not the administrator's disciple, but the Lingzhou general's advisor, I would put myself in his shoes, standing in His Highness the heir apparent's point of view to look at the problem. There are 3 ways to deal with it. The worst way is to try to use killing people to convince the masses. There are also 3 levels of high, middle, and low. Killing a large number of officials was a bad idea, so it could only cause the people in Lingzhou to lose their confidence. Not only did the local officials in Lingzhou feel that this Lingzhou general was useless, even the scholars from other places who were watching the show thought that they had married the wrong man and had met the wrong person. If they could kill the officials that caused trouble today, they could kill them tomorrow. The situation was precarious, so what if they got an official position in a short period of time? The best plan was to kill a few officials like Song Yan, which was relatively better because Su Li was not the main instigator of the chaos in Lingzhou. He was ordered by officials around the same level as Song Yan. There were civil officials and generals, and they were all deep-rooted local snakes. With this group of people secretly instructing them, Lingzhou was able to work together. As for whether to kill Song Yan, kill the governor, or take the chance to cut off the limbs of the Huaihua general of Longqing Prefecture, there was not much of a difference. The officials that caused trouble were timid and kept quiet out of fear. The Lingzhou officialdom would have a moment of peace, but this plan was not a long-term plan. Once the Lingzhou general left, Lingzhou would still be Lingzhou. This was the same logic as the dynasty ruling over corrupt officials. Treating the symptoms but not the root cause. When the spring breeze blows, the weeds grow. The best way is very simple. You just need to kill one person. Li Fuzhen had never been interested in the officialdom, but when the governor talked about it, she did not find it boring. However, Song Yan's following words caused her to lose all color in her face, that is to kill Administrator Darren. Killing anyone would be better than killing your father to intimidate Lingzhou. Even the administrator of Biyao, whose official rank was the same as that of Beiliang's protector general, could be killed. If one angered His Royal Highness, who could escape the calamity? Moreover, niece, you certainly know what kind of official Administrator Darren is. In the officialdom, people would burn the bridge after crossing the river. There was no end to it. In the Li Yangwen, there was the Song family, which had 3 heroes and 2 teachers. In the military, there was the Han family, which had been guarding the border of Jizhou for generations. Compared to official Li, they were all genuine pillars of the imperial court. In this sense, if they could die, official Li could die many times over. To put it bluntly, the Li family had plundered so much gold and silver. After the confiscation, the soldiers at the border would be able to enjoy a lavish new year. There were 20 to 30 pawn shops under the Li family's name. There were countless bribes from the subordinates. Rare toys, antiques, calligraphy, and paintings were bought by the Li family with their left hand and sold at a high price from the pawn shops with their right hand. Not to mention, there were also 2-horse caravans with more than 100 people that specialized in salt and iron trade and tea-horse trade. Thus, when I, Song Yan, heard that His Royal Highness was the general of Lingzhou, my first thought was that the Su family wanted to deal with your Li family. I even sent someone to send a secret letter to the border asking if your brother Li Hanlin was under house arrest. I don't know if it was because teacher was under the light or because he trusted the old relationship between the Su and Li families too much. Li Fuzhen finally spoke, our family would not have fallen to such a state. Song Yan smiled and said something strange. If these words came from teacher's mouth, uncle might not believe it. Li Fuzhen had a blank expression. Song Yan continued, His Highness did not use these 3 plans to resolve Lingzhou's predicament, which was unexpected. This was because the 2 best plans above the worst plan all tested one's maturity. If one was not careful, it would be a thankless end. The middle plan was to use people to kill people and build momentum. None of these could be lacking. The best plan was for him to not be the general of Lingzhou who was personally involved in the situation. He used the power of the king of Biyao to put pressure on the administrator and Zhong Hongwu. Then, with Huang Chang and the others who had just entered Biyao, he worked from the bottom up step by step. One on top, one on the bottom, one on the inside, one on the outside. In the end, he had Su official, who was caught between the 2 sides, go with the flow and follow the trend. However, while such a method was meticulous, it could only be done gradually. At the very least, it would take a year or 2. Since His Highness, for some reason, chose the middle plan, which was more radical than the worst plan, then uncle, who did not want to be the governor of a prefecture, had a chance. Other than uncle's own ambition, there is actually one thing that I need to tell Sir Li. The one who needs to defile himself is not Song Yan, but teacher himself. Song Yan is not so important as to defile his own reputation. On the other hand, it is time for teacher to reduce his own power. Song Yan leaving the Li family is the right time. Li Fuzhen said softly, I don't know how much of uncle's words are true or false. I also don't know if these plans are good or bad. I only remember that father once said in private that Uncle Song was not as good as him as an official, but he saw the situation better than him. It was just that Biyao is small, so Uncle Song could only use 2 of his power. Song Yan was stunned. After a long time, he sighed heavily, Teacher knows me. Li Fuzhen raised her head and looked into the distance. She asked, Sir Song, is His Royal Highness a smart person like you? Song Yan had probably just joined the Lingzhou general, so it was hard for him not to be a bit worried. He did not directly give an answer. He only said, in the past, it was not good to make wild guesses. Now that we have met, it is clear. In Biyao, there is no one more self-deprecating than him. Since Li Fuzhen called him Sir Song and not Uncle Song, Song Yan knew that his relationship with his teacher's family had pretty much stopped there. He said calmly, Song Yan will say one last thing from the bottom of my heart. That Guo Fufeng is a person who can only share riches and honor. As for whether or not he can share hardships, I am thinking too much. The Li family will probably not collapse one day. There was no anger on Li Fuzhen's face. She gently bowed and left slowly. In the secret room of the private residence in Huangnam County, Han Shang had already been skinned alive and had his tendons pulled out, but he still stubbornly refused to say a word. Su Fengnian stretched his hand into the basin to wash his hands. Looking at the slightly rippling, thick blood, he sighed, not everyone can be a great spy. Hong Shuwen's hair stood on end as he stood to the side. Su Yanbing, on the other hand, had a calm expression. Hong Shuwen looked at His Royal Highness's hands that were still slightly red. Should I go change the basin of water? Su Fengnian nodded. Su Yanbing waited for Hong Shuwen to change the basin of water before quietly saying, Your Highness, if I am not wrong, is this Han Diaoxi's unique silk drawing technique? Chapter 903. Su Fengnian didn't hide anything from this loyal and devoted senior. He pointed at his own head and said with a smile, after Han Xingxian was killed in Divine Martial City, I had an unorthodox method to use his head to learn some things. Back then, when I killed Raccoon Diwu in northern Mang, I also benefited greatly from it. However, my foundation in the Yellow Court was stripped away by Lu Hao's astronomical technique. My cultivation is not good enough. Even if I know how to use many techniques, I can't use them. It's like a low-level swordsman who has memorized all the moves of the two-sleeved green snake, but his strength is not enough. 4 Realm First Level. I have already entered the False Realm 3 times, maybe 4 times. No one has ever done it before. I don't have any regrets. Su Yanbing did not say anything else. Hong Shuwen brought in a basin of clean water. Su Fengnian washed his hands thoroughly and shook off the water. With a thought, 7 or 8 flying swords flew out of Han Shang's body one by one. They spun around in the basin of water and then disappeared into his sleeves. As long as the sword embryo was complete, these little things did not need to be supported by internal energy. Thus, Su Fengnian could use them with ease. Su Fengnian left the secret room and returned to the house. In the courtyard, the turtles and reeds from Huangnam County, who had been cleared of suspicion, began to move stealthily in an orderly manner. Some acted as bait, while others acted as camouflage. Wang Tongke also disappeared without a trace. Although everyone in the courtyard was on the brink of death, it was actually very common for some mobile spies other than the turtles, especially spies near the border. In the past, there was a county in Yuzhou where spies were so exaggerated that Chu Lushan had to personally lead 600 cavalry to encircle them. Only one of the 17 spies did not stand in Beimang's camp. The rest were infiltrated by Beimang, while the rest were lured or forced to side with Beimang. Chu Lushan walked in alone and faced the 17 spies. He said self-deprecatingly, "I am honored to tell you that after I joined, you only have 2 enemies." Of course, Beimang's southern dynasty was not much better than Beiliang's. Su Fengnian moved a chair and sat under the eaves, quietly waiting for the peregrine falcon and eagle guard to arrive. According to the secret report, the 3 lairs of the 2 old and 1 new in Huangnam County were located in a Taoist temple, a gang, and a brothel. During the Spring and Autumn War, the brothels of various countries were no doubt the spies, so when Chu was in charge of the spies, he was disdainful when he took charge of the report. He said, he captured a popular courtesan from each of the 10 brothels. 3 or 3. At the end of the Spring and Autumn War, there were very few idiots who would do such a thing. Firstly, it was very difficult to train an elite spy who was a woman. Secondly, everyone already knew that it was easy to gather information in brothels. The local spies kept a close eye on the prostitutes in brothels. If there was even the slightest bit of suspicion, they would rather kill the wrong person than let the wrong person go. Now that the smoke had dispersed, female spies began to hide in the brothels again. It was just that there were not many of them. Su Fengnian leaned against the back of the chair under the eaves. He slowly thought of Dunhuang and Wu Meinyang. Compared to Jiangnan, Beiliang was late at night. Su Fengnian looked up at the quiet and peaceful twilight. The Beimang spies, who did not know they were in danger because of the Korean merchants and the black carp shelter, could still live for a few more hours. There was a series of subtle knocks on the door. Hong Shuwen, who was in charge of odd jobs, went to open the door. Su Fengnian looked over and smiled. He saw a familiar face. When the person saw His Royal Highness, she was also pleasantly surprised. Su Fengnian knew her name was Ren Shanyu. She was a woman in her 30s. She used to use a pair of Xianhua axes. She still had the face of a young girl. What was especially rare was her chest. In Shenwu City, she had almost died at the hands of a cat man. In front of the cat man, who was known as Invincible Han, anyone could die at a moment's notice. Su Fengnian smiled and asked the woman, who was kneeling on the ground, to stand up. He said softly, "Ren Shanyu, this time you are leading 40 Eagle Guard into Huangnam County? That's a promotion. Congratulations." Ren Shanyu, whose name was called out by His Highness, smiled brightly, revealing a pair of cute little canine teeth that did not match her age. It was hard to imagine that such a little girl, who caused people's imagination to run wild, would wipe the blood on her chest with the axe after chopping people like cutting vegetables. She said shyly, "Your Highness, it is Wang Lin, who appeared in Shenwu City with me, who is leading the team. I am just a pawn who is scouting ahead, similar to a scout in the army. The peregrine falcon has already met with Wang Tongke." Wang Lin and the others entered the city at 5:15. Su Fengnian nodded and asked Hong Shuwen to bring a chair for the woman. She seemed to have received a great reward that she did not dare to hope for. Her face was filled with surprise and anxiety. She sat down gently, but only dared to put half of her butt on the chair. Su Fengnian smiled and asked, "You just became a small official? It doesn't match your achievements. Do you want me to help you say something?" The woman, who had once become a bandit in Jianghu Mountain and killed countless people, was fidgeting uneasily. Her earlobes were already red. She tried her best to calm herself down and not let her chest tremble too much. She said solemnly, "This servant was born in a lowly family in Dongyue. If it wasn't for the fact that Northern Liang took me in when I was 9 years old and became a spy, I would have died long ago. I'm also stupid. I've delayed military plans twice. If I were anywhere else, I would have slit my throat and committed suicide to atone for my sins. I'm already satisfied to be alive." Su Fengnian put his elbow on the armrest of the chair and rested his chin on his hand. He smiled and said, "I didn't expect Lu Qiuer to still have some humanity left." Hearing His Royal Highness's frank comments about General Chu, whom all Beiliang spies respected like a god, Ren Shanyu thought she had made a big mistake. She was so scared that she wanted to stand up and kneel down again. Su Fengnian pressed down with his other hand. "I'm just saying. Don't be nervous." Ren Shanyu's but fell back on the chair. She was even more afraid to speak. Ren Shanyu gathered her courage and sneaked a glance at Su Fengnian. She saw His Royal Highness squinting his eyes and smiling enchantingly. She clenched the corners of her clothes tightly. Her face was covered in sweat. She wanted to say something. Su Fengnian said helplessly, "If you have something to say, say it." Ren Shanyu gritted her teeth. She lowered her head and murmured, "Your Highness, I only have one wish in my life." Su Fengnian turned to look at the woman. He asked curiously, "Tell me." She raised her head. After saying this, she fell limp on the chair. This time, her butt was finally able to sit firmly on the chair. Hong Shuwen wanted to laugh but didn't dare. He felt uncomfortable holding it in. He admired this woman from the bottom of his heart. She actually dared to take liberties with His Royal Highness. Her wish was to have His Royal Highness personally touch her chest before she died. She even said that this was the only thing she could give him. Hong Shuwen didn't know why, but when he saw the woman's resolute and clear eyes, he felt an indescribable sadness. Su Fengnian stretched out his hand and helped her tidy up her hair. Then Su Fengnian retracted his hand and looked forward. He muttered to himself, "This time, on the way to Huangnam County, I kept thinking about how to do things in Lingzhou. With those people who only talk about rules and not reason, is it worth it for me to talk about rules, reason, and affection? But now I understand." The woman who forgot to be shy clearly didn't understand what His Royal Highness was saying. Su Fengnian's lips curled up. "I don't need to touch it. I know that places vary." After pausing for a long time, His Royal Highness finally spat out 2 words. "Spectacular." Chapter 904. 9,000 word chapters. In the 17th day of this month, I have only updated 18 chapters, only making up for the 5 chapters one owed last month. However, the 18 chapters already have a total of 90,000 words. The average word count of each chapter is close to 5,000 words. I think that the lack of updates is still a necessary effort. Moreover, this kind of updating without deliberately splitting the chapters to make up for the lack of updates is also an effort. In the future, I won't talk about updating in the chapters. In any case, I will remember it in my heart. When night fell, Hong Shuwen excitedly followed Wang Tongke to fish with the net. The other 2 members of the Phoenix Battalion stayed in the courtyard. Su Fengnian left the courtyard and only brought Su Yanbing and Huyan Guanin, who had disguised herself as a page boy. They came to a place that would make a virtuous gentleman both spit and swallow his saliva. The brothel was coincidentally adjacent to the brothel alley in Huangnam County where the net was being collected. Lingzhou was rich and populous. Visiting prostitutes was a common practice. Many of the bodhisattvas and heavenly maidens that merchants spent a lot of money to provide for also had plump bodies. Many monks and monks who saw the sculptures and murals all lamented that the human heart was not what it used to be. Walking in the brightly lit and powdered fireworks alley, there were many ambitious and arrogant guests wearing mink coats. Huyen Guanyin followed behind Su Fengnian, afraid that she would lose him. No matter what situation Su Yanbing was in, his state of mind was like an ancient well without ripples. Perhaps he was also like this when he attained Heaven's Gate. As the former hedonistic leader of Biyao, Su Fengnian was familiar with this kind of work. He chose the most brightly lit Peach Cheeks brothel. The brothel was 3 stories high and the lanterns hung high. It was not like the neighboring brothels where a few women with heavy makeup were sent out to solicit business. Su Fengnian waved his hand and threw a piece of silver to the brothel's turtle leg. The silver did not even need to be weighed and instantly slid into his sleeve. The young man's smiling face immediately became attentive. This kind of person was not simple. He had good eyesight, a good tongue, and a strong body. He sized them up from head to toe and decided that there were a few distinguished guests who could spend a lot of money. He immediately shouted, but in reality, he was sending a secret message to the brothel keeper. As expected, a woman walked out slowly from the brothel. However, compared to most brothel keepers who were middle-aged women, this woman was very young. Su Fengnian's discerning eyes saw that she was the brothel keeper's daughter, commonly known as the little boss. When she saw Su Fengnian, she was in high spirits and obediently snuggled up to him. Su Fengnian did not take advantage of the situation to take advantage of her. He pinched a piece of silver with 2 fingers and threw it into the white and tender cleavage between the woman's bright red silk tube top. He smiled and said that he wanted 2 musicians who could play music and not some courtesan. The little boss was very happy. In her line of work, there were 2 kinds of bastards that she was most afraid of. The first kind was those whose family background was neither high nor low. They were not rich, but they could still afford to enjoy themselves for 10 to 15 months. They were half a bucket of water, and as soon as they arrived at the brothel, they would start to show off, wishing that they could buy all the girls in the brothel. The second kind was those who did not have much money, but could not be considered the son of an official. Not only did they rely on their family background to eat and drink for free, they also liked to cause trouble. In the end, if they could not solve the trouble, they would only give the brothel a hard time. The gray-haired young master in front of her was very heartwarming. He was generous and tactful. Because he spent money on the courtesans, the amount of money he spent was not much less than those popular courtesans. Moreover, he could also increase the popularity of the courtesans. If he was a poet or scholar with a small reputation, he could sing a few poems with the girls, and these courtesans would really become outstanding. Without needing Su Fengnian to say anything, he was invited to an elegant room on the 3rd floor. When they were going up the stairs, the graceful little head slender waist swayed more vigorously than usual. In her mind, if this elegant young master wanted her to accompany him, even if she offered a lower price, it would not be a big deal. Most of the men in Biyao were strong and rough. With his appearance and temperament, which was similar to that of a scholar from a Jiangnan aristocratic family, in the end, she should be the one to take advantage of the job. When the young master reached the 3rd floor, he asked for a room facing the street. She kindly reminded him that it would be a little noisy here, but he dismissed it with a laugh. The little head was also happy to go with the flow. If the guest was willing to spend money in vain, she could not cry and shout to stop him. She pushed open the door and entered. In the room, there was already a young courtesan waiting for business. Before she went out to call for another guest, a young master with a pair of red phoenix eyes tugged on her sleeve. Without batting an eyelid, he asked her to hold a banknote. He smiled and said, "What's with riding a donkey looking for a donkey looking for a donkey looking for a donkey?" The little head's eyes jumped with joy. She knew the answer, so she teased the young master and asked him what he meant by riding a donkey looking for a donkey looking for a donkey. But that young master did not overdo it. He did not say the word ride, which slightly tickled her heart. However, this kind of small ripple came and went in a hurry. It was much faster than many people with silver spears and wax heads taking off their pants and putting on their pants. Su Fengnian did not sit down. Su Yanbing went out of the room and closed the door. He stood at the door with his eyes closed and focused. Huyen Guannin's back was almost leaning against the wall. She was wearing a large mink hat as she stared fixedly at her own boots. The young manager's eyes were sharp. How could he not recognize that this was a woman? Biyao had always had an open culture. Women were not only experts in riding horses, drawing bows and hunting. Some bold and unrestrained women would not only pay to invite the courtesans into their manors to sing, they also dared to personally come to the brothel for a stroll. Some of the more bold and unrestrained women would not only pay to invite the courtesans into their manors to sing, they would also dare to personally come to the brothel for a stroll. Some of the more unique and gluttonous women had long been accustomed to this sight in larger brothels. There was a slightly aged courtesan in the Peach Cheeks brothel who would be invited by a widow in Lingzhou to grind a mirror every few days. Every time she returned, she would still be radiant and radiant. The young manager privately asked her how she felt, and the courtesan would reply with the word excellent. Then, everything would be revealed without a word. This almost caused the young manager's heart to be moved and he wanted to give it a try. Unfortunately, the courtesan said that the unattainable widow liked women of the same age as her. Only then did the young manager resentfully give up. Taking advantage of the slender and handsome young master admiring a clear bottle with a few winter-sweet flowers, the young leader introduced herself as Chao Jun. Not to mention in a brothel, this was a vulgar name that was considered rare anywhere. She also introduced the girl who had a good relationship with her as Snowsuit. There was a bamboo cage in the room with a parrot whose feathers were as white as snow. While Chao Jun was talking, Su Fengnian touched the opening of the bottle. Then, he tilted his head and tapped the mysterious cyan bottle with his finger. Not only did Chao Jun find it interesting, but even Snowsuit, who was obviously not familiar with serving customers, also had a look of surprise in her eyes. The corners of her mouth curled up slightly. Living in a brothel, they had seen many rough men who reeked of alcohol. They had seen many old men whose bodies were soft and fleshy but had lecherous looks. They had even seen many scholars who were gentle and refined when opening the door and closing the door impatiently. This young master who had the patience to make things difficult for a cheap bottle behind closed doors was very amusing to them. Huyen Guanyin extended a finger and gently lifted her mink hat. Seeing that he did not do anything that she did not know whether to say was dissolute or vulgar, she, who was sullen, snorted softly, but her mood was slightly better. Su Fengnian, who had his eyes fixed on the bottle as soon as he entered, exhaled and winked at the three women in the room. Then, he tapped the slender neck and the round body of the bottle. He smiled at Chao Jun and said, "Listen, one bell and one chime. If you carefully distinguish them, you can tell that the sounds are very distinct. This is a bottle produced by the Dongyue Imperial Kiln. Not to mention the whole bottle, even a fingernail-sized fragment is more expensive than gold or jade. The reason why it is so priceless, other than the scarcity of porcelain produced by this kiln, is because of the sound of the bell." In the Book of Music, Sage Zhang wrote a very famous sentence: "When a gentleman hears the sound of the bell, he thinks of the military officials in danger. When he hears the sound of the bell, he thinks of the officials in charge of the border." How could Chao Jun believe in the Dongyue Imperial Kiln's gallbladder bottle? She also did not know what a scholarly gentleman's bell was. She only thought that he was a man who flaunted his knowledge. She threw a coquettish glance at him and smiled tenderly. "Young master, did you come to visit a brothel or to knock on a bottle? If you want it, go ahead and take it." If Chao Jun frowns in the slightest, Chao Jun and Snowsuit will recommend themselves to you when you come to Peach Cheek's house. They will even give you money every time. Su Fengnian smiled and shook his head. He took out all the banknotes, rolled them into a ball, and gently threw them into another flower vase. "It's up to you to believe it or not. In any case, I only have this much money on me. If I take the bottle, I can live with my conscience." Chao Jun suddenly widened her eyes and said, "Young master, you're not joking." Su Fengnian sat down and asked with a smile, "Are you regretting it?" Chao Jun hesitated for a moment, then laughed heartily and said, "What's there to regret? If young master didn't say it, sooner or later, it would have been broken by that clumsy girl. I would just take a dustpan and dump it on the street. Maybe someone would even think it was a hindrance. However, since young master is penniless, Chao Jun won't ask for an extra copper coin tonight. But young master must promise to come to Peach Cheek's house often to visit my little sister Snowsuit. Is that all right?" By the time she finished speaking, Chao Jun was already glued to Su Fengnian's body. The two of them sat on the same chair. He sat on the chair and she sat on his lap. They didn't delay each other. Chao Jun had a graceful figure. Her full breasts were cleverly rubbed together. Her charming face was full of charm. Su Fengnian patted her leg and motioned for her to get up without hurting her feelings. He squinted his eyes and said with a smile, "I'm not from Lingzhou, so it will be difficult for me to come to Peach Cheek's house in the future. However, I have a few friends who are doing well in Lingzhou. If Peach Cheek's house wants to move to the county capital or meets with some trouble in Huangnam County, I can ask them to help say a few words. Of course, you didn't believe me when I said that the porcelain bottle was worth 1,000 taels of gold. You can choose not to believe me this time." After Chao Jun got up, she didn't care about pretending to be reserved anymore. She was afraid that there wouldn't be another opportunity like this. She hurriedly and carefully asked, "Young master made friends in Lingzhou's county capital. Chao Jun doesn't dare to have extravagant hopes to associate with them and doesn't dare to disturb them. However, may I ask who is the son of an aristocratic family in Huangnam County? Our Peach Cheek's house is willing to worship him like a bodhisattva." Chapter 905. Su Fengnian glanced at the window from the corner of his eyes. The Peach Cheeks building was only slightly shorter than the largest brothel in Lingzhou. Looking from here, it was clear at a glance. If the porcelain bottle fell into the hands of someone who knew its value, it would be impossible to get it without 2,000 to 3,000 taels of silver. Su Fengnian was always in a good mood when doing business. No matter if it was a big business that made him a lot of money or a small business that made him a pitiful few copper coins. It had been a few years since he went to a brothel. Furthermore, after being in love for so many years, he only had the part of being absurd and prodigal. It was the first time that he had made money, so it was a good sign. This made Su Fengnian not have any ill feelings towards Chao Jun's scheming. After sifting through the names in his mind, he knew that with the Peach Cheeks building's little boss's vision, she was coincidentally from Lingzhou in Huangnam County. Not to mention that Su Fengnian did not know any of them, even if he knew a few of them, they would only be laughed at by her. However, Li Hanlin, who grew up in Huangnam County, did not dare to bring a few of them to embarrass himself in front of him. The few that he brought to Liangzhou were more beautiful and enchanting than women. They were all young Master Li's old sweethearts. This made Su Fengnian feel a little troubled. Could it be that he could only bring up Song Yan, official song? However, if this was the case, it would be quite interesting if it spread out. He believed that even if it reached Governor Song's ears, the newly promoted governor of Lingzhou could only pinch his nose and accept it. Su Fengnian resisted the urge to throw a bucket of dirty water at Song Yan with great difficulty because he inadvertently remembered one of Li Hanlin's enemies. Back then, that guy had been dealt with miserably by Li Hanlin, the #1 young ruffian in Feng Province. After Liang was established, Feng Province merged with Lingzhou, and the Li family moved to Lingzhou's capital. That foppish playboy finally had a chance to live. Although his father's official rank had always been suppressed by the administrator, at least he didn't have to live in fear all day long. Especially after Li Hanlin joined the army, he was completely reborn. He didn't care about these old grudges at all. That guy didn't feel ashamed of the miserable situation he had encountered back then and instead felt proud. Whenever he met someone, he would say that he had fought with Li Hanlin and Li Biaozhang from the Purple Diao Street in the north all the way to the Straw Coat Street in the south. Did anyone dare? Perhaps when the Li family moved to Lingzhou, there were still people who dared to say a few words. However, when Li Hanlin chopped off a bunch of barbarians' heads at the border, no one dared to have such courage. Su Fengnian had gone to Huangnam County to walk in the spring with Li Hanlin and his brothers. He had barely seen that poor guy once, but he didn't even greet him. He didn't know if that guy still had a memory of him. Therefore, Su Fengnian smiled and said, "Huangnam County's meritorious Governor Wang's son, Wang Yunshu. He has some friendship with me." When he said this name, not only did Chao Jun's eyes change, even the artist, Snowsuit, who was far less experienced than the little leader, was somewhat afraid. There was no other reason. This Grand Master Wang was too domineering in Huangnam County. It could be said that he had a well-known reputation. As soon as the administrator's son, Nashan, left, Wang Yunshu called himself the king. His father, as the meritorious officer of the county, assisted the governor Song Yan and was in charge of the selection of the Department of Administration. That meant that he grasped the lifeline of the promotion of officials. It could be said that he held the power of life and death in his hands. Moreover, Wang Gongchao had an adopted son who was about the same age as him. It was not known whether the Wang family had arranged things well or that the adopted son was really lucky at the border. When he returned to Huangnam County, he became the commandant of 400 soldiers. As a result, some of the gang leaders with many martial arts schools had to call him brother in front of others and beg for mercy behind others. The reason why Chao Jun of Peach Cheek's brothel was so attentive was mainly because young Master Wang was a big benefactor of their brothel. The Shitakian on the street in Huangnam County had once annoyed young Master Wang. If it were not for the relatives of the Shitakian and the administrator who sent women and money, young Master Wang would have brought people to demolish the brothel long ago. Since then, young Master Wang often came to Peach Cheek's brothel to throw money and money. Coincidentally, Wang Yunshu monopolized 2 courtesans in Peach Cheek's brothel tonight. They were having fun on the same floor, but there was some distance between them. After all, the little leader was Snowsuit, a courtesan who was close to Chao Jun. Her status in Peach Cheek's brothel was not high. Chao Jun was kind and only led some pleasing guests into this room, afraid that Snowsuit would be wronged. This was a rare tenderness in a brothel that did not know what the word friendship meant. More of them were poor young prostitutes who were forced to break their buds because they did not want to be eliminated. More of them were women who were bruised but still forced to smile. Chao Jun was also cruel and merciless to the women in Peach Cheek's brothel except for Snowsuit. If she did not do this, even if she was the little leader, she would not be able to stand firm. Chao Jun took a step forward and then stepped back. She threw a glance at Snowsuit, and the courtesan began to play the zither. Chao Jun then smiled and said, "What a coincidence, Master Wang is on the first floor. Is he with you?" Chao Jun had already regarded the child in front of her as talking nonsense. As long as he said no and casually found an excuse, Chao Jun would not ask the root of the matter. He came to Peach Cheek's brothel in the winter to seek pleasure, so there was no need to make a scene. Otherwise, Chao Jun initially had the mischievous idea of going out to invite Wang Yunshu to verify his identity. However, if she did that, it would not benefit her. After Wang Yunshu came over, he would beat the child in front of her out of the brothel. As the main culprit, Chao Jun would not gain any benefits, so why bother? They saw the child walk to the window and lean against the window frame. Out of Chao Jun and Snowsuit's expectations, his voice was warm as he said, "Just in time. I'll have to trouble Miss Chao Jun to go and tell him that an old friend of his has come to Peach Cheek's brothel in Lingzhou's capital." Chao Jun smiled and asked, "Child, then I'll really go?" Su Fengnian smiled and said, "If you don't go, then you're a puppy." Chao Jun's charming eyes were like silk. To think that child is a scholar and likes such indecent positions. Huyen Guanyin, who had been quietly listening, felt that it was strange at first. After she came to her senses, she fiercely glared at that fellow. Su Fengnian, who had suffered an unexpected calamity, simply turned his head and looked at Shitakian, which was still singing and dancing peacefully. Chao Jun saw that he did not seem to be joking. After quickly weighing the pros and cons, she still gathered her courage and went out to trouble the surly child Wang. Su Fengnian was quietly waiting for the turmoil in Shitakian. This was because he was not very certain that the Biyao spy would be able to achieve great success and then easily retreat unscathed. Han Shang's unexpected surprise, to the Peregrine Falcon and Eagle Guard, who were currently rushing to Huangnam County to encircle and suppress him, it was very likely that it would be a bad thing that would require many lives to make up for. Biyao was Biyao. Men of sacrifice were men of sacrifice. They might not always be connected to everything. This was because Han Shang's identity being exposed was not within expectations. With such an important person like him participating, there would most likely be 1 or 2 Biyao men of sacrifice with outstanding strength to hold the fort in Huangnam County. There were not many bloody battles between spies. The side that had the initiative would win because they had a target to aim at. Everything had its vanquisher. The more accurate the plan, the better. If you had a 3rd-grade martial artist present, then I would send a 2nd-grade master to fight with you. If you had a master, then I would send 2. If you had 3, then I would not hesitate to use a 1st-grade Vajra realm martial artist to play with you. It was difficult to survive in the Jianghu. Those who were at the peak of the Jianghu were not necessarily free and unfettered. This was especially so for those who had become lackeys. They had no choice but to cherish their reputation. This was because they would never know if their next life and death battle would be a mortal enemy of the same realm or even an expert of a higher realm. These experts who stood on the opposing side, even if they were known as rare and transcendent figures, once you encountered them, once was enough. Decades of hard work, decades of martial arts training, even if you were in the Jianghu when you were alive, you would still end up with nothing. Of course, the battle between spies was more like Wang Tongke and Han Shang's climbing. It relied on acting skills, adaptability, and luck. Su Fengnian listened to the melodious sound of the zither and turned to look at Huyan Guanyin, who was finally willing to approach him. She looked up and asked softly, "That sister Ren in the courtyard, she likes you?" Su Fengnian laughed involuntarily and said softly, "She likes someone who is not the next king of Biyao. Otherwise, she would have worked for Biyao since she was 9 years old and would feel that she was not worth it. However, to be honest, if she found out that I was an ugly pig head after meeting me in Shenwu City, then she would definitely not have told me her wish when we met in the courtyard today." Huyan Guanyin raised her chin and looked away. "Then why didn't you fulfill that sister's wish? Isn't it as easy as lifting a finger?" On the way to Huangnam County, Su Fengnian, who had been separated by a thin layer of silk, had a smile on his face. She did not get an answer, but her mood was lighter than if she had gotten one. She turned around with a straight face and secretly smiled. Su Fengnian turned to look at the brothel and said in his heart, "Death warriors don't even have any thoughts. They will only die faster." The reason why he did not participate was not only because he did not want to get too involved in the spy system, but more importantly, he and Su Yanbing had acted too early, making the extermination go too smoothly. Some old bastards hiding at the bottom of the quagmire would rather watch their disciples and grand-disciples die one after the other than stay in the quagmire and not be willing to rashly come ashore. Many things that could have been handled simply would often become very complicated because he was Su Fengnian. He had no choice but to consolidate at every step. Chapter 906. Su Fengnian listened to the gradually mixed sound of the zither. One of the reasons was that her fingering technique was not skillful enough. Another reason was that although this new zither was forced to use a trick, it was not possible to go to the peak of a mountain to obtain good materials, so it used an old cedar beam as the body of the zither. This was the helplessness of many poor zither masters, but this was not the problem. Many novices and even veterans who had been immersed in the zither all their lives did not realize that the body of the zither was not necessarily neat and smooth. Those who could play the zither might not be able to hack the zither, but those who could hack the zither must be good at playing the zither. When Su Fengnian was young, he did not know how many famous zither he had dissected. He found that these grooves were not as smooth as a mirror as described in the zither score. With Su Yanbing outside the room, he did not have to worry about Shiitake and not knowing what was going on. Since Chao Jun had not invited Master Wang, Su Fengnian had nothing to do, so he walked over to Snowsuit and asked her to get up. Under the incredulous gaze of this woman, he cut the zither open. He quietly took out a flying sword from his sleeve and helped her hack the zither a little. He smiled and said, "If you break the zither, I will buy you a new one later. I still have the money." In fact, a good zither lies in the sound that wants to come out but cannot. To put it in a more vulgar way, it is like a woman taking off her clothes seductively. When she is about to take off her clothes but not completely, it always makes a man daydream. When there is nothing left. Let's not use this analogy, it will spoil the mood. What I can do now is very limited. However, when you find someone to hack the zither for you in the future, you can tell them. Snowsuit listened to this elegant young master's seemingly endless warm and mellow talk. At first, she was able to remember every word, but later, she could not help but ask with a smile, "Young master, did you really come to the Peach Cheek's house to get drunk?" Su Fengnian did not raise his head. He teased, from beginning to end, "You did not give me any wine. There was tea, but even if I drank the whole teapot, I would not get drunk." Huyen Guanyin came to the front of the bamboo birdcage and made a face at the parrot. Snowsuit was about to get the wine when Su Fengnian shook his head and said, "No need." Then, Snowsuit saw the young master carefully playing the zither. She was in a daze. Su Fengnian abruptly stood up and then sat down again. He stared blankly at the broken zither that he had personally chopped. He withdrew his gaze and closed his eyes. He tapped his forehead with a finger and murmured softly. In fact, he was constantly repeating a sentence, "When things are unfair, they cry out." Snowsuit only thought that this young master had gone mad from playing the zither. That young master was still talking to himself, but his words were fragmentary. In addition, she was also frightened, so she couldn't hear him clearly. Uncle Sun Ping once said that there is a vast expanse between heaven and earth. Two once wandered the world in a trance. Su Fengnian reached out and tried to grab something. Then, his fingers began to draw in the air in a disorderly manner. Snowsuit moved even further away from him. Outside the room, Su Yanbing suddenly opened his eyes, as if he was facing a great enemy. As for further away, Chao Jun felt as if she was risking her life by knocking on Wang Yunshu's door. Inside, there was laughter and laughter. Outside the room, there was a large group of retainers. There were the armed soldiers of young Master Wang's sworn brother, as well as the direct disciples of the masters of the major gangs in Huangnam County. The way they looked at her, the little leader, was not serious. As expected, the door did not open. Only Wang Yunshu's scolding could be heard. He threatened that if anyone dared to spoil his mood, he would break the legs of the men and feed them to the dogs. As for the women, he would reward more than 10 of his subordinates. Chao Jun was so frightened that her voice trembled. She did not dare to push the door open. She said in a trembling voice, "Young Master Wang, I am Chao Jun. I have something to report. A young man from Lingzhou City just came to our Peach Cheek's house. After drinking some wine, he claimed to be young Master Wang's old friend. I don't know if it's true or not." Chao Jun boldly came to inform young Master Wang, just in case he is really young Master Wang's friend. She said that he drank wine, but she lamented in her heart. That young master has done his best, but this is the best he can do to smooth things over for you. Inside the house, there was a unique crisp sound of fat jiggling. Grand Master Wang panted and scolded angrily, "Tell that guy to get out of here as soon as possible. If he comes to bother me again, I'll let you have fun with him on the street outside the Peach Cheek house." Chao Jun did not have a trace of luck anymore. She scolded herself for being obsessed. She hoped that Wang Yunshu would not go to Snowsuit's room to do evil. She immediately apologized and was about to leave. The unbearable noise in the room suddenly stopped. "Wait a minute, is he from Lingzhou City?" Chao Gu quietly made a bitter face and wished she could slap herself. Even though Wang Yunshu was in the room and couldn't see her, she still obediently squeezed out a smile and said, "That's right, it's Lingzhou. Master Wang is wise. How is his appearance?" "Not bad. F***K off. If you continue to play dumb with me, do you believe that I will make you crawl in here and squat by the toilet for the entire night?" He is a rather handsome young man. Did he bring a large group of retainers? No, I only brought one. He is not as imposing as young Master Wang. He is far from being imposing. One? Yes, one is correct. What does a short-sighted woman like you know about imposing? Wait, I will go with you to take a look. The sound of clothes being worn could be heard in the room. It made Chao Jun despair. Chapter 907. Peach Cheek's brothel was an imitation of the southeast and the tube-shaped houses in the Miao area. There was a patio in the middle and there was no cover. It was cool in summer and snowy in winter. However, the interior of the building was divided into 2 rooms. Snowsuit's room faced the street. Like Wang Yunshu's, the 2 rooms were combined into one. It was much more spacious. There was no distinction between the inside and the outside. The interior decoration was extremely luxurious. All the items were expensive. It was far from what Qingming, and Snowsuit's room could compare to. The reason why Wang Yunshu made the Peach Cheeks brothel his god of fortune was because he had a strange hobby. He liked to have sex with women who were not as beautiful as the most popular courtesans. He liked to drag them to the window railings inside to watch the rain fall. It was a feast for the eyes of many customers on the same floor. It was said that it was better to enjoy it together than to enjoy it alone. Therefore, every time young Master Wang came to the Peach Cheeks brothel, there would always be many men who heard the news and hurried over. Even if they could not share the rain and dew, they could at least reward their eyes. Obviously, the people on the same floor didn't get to enjoy it today. Fortunately, Wang Yunshu had said in private that when his father became the governor of Huangnam County, he would definitely make the 2 courtesans go to the window railings obediently and let everyone enjoy it. This was called a celebration. The door opened. A courtesan who had a bad relationship with the head of the building had a face full of lust. She glanced at Kusanagi from the corner of her eyes. That was a coldness that could only be understood between women. She was gloating. Chao Zhuan led young Master Wang, who was carelessly draped in a fox fur coat, and walked with difficulty. Wang Yunshu kicked Chao Zhuan's calf. Are you lame? Or are your legs weak from being ordered around? Hurry up. If you delay my business, just you wait. I don't care if you're Mother Hong's daughter or not. Hee, if you lie about military intelligence, don't even mention it. In the army, you'll be executed. Anyway, there's no place on your body that's clean. You should have been thrown into the river and drowned in a pig cage long ago. Why would I care about you whores? Chao Zhuan bit her lips and smiled. She didn't know who she was smiling at. Wang Yunshu brought the group of evil servants and retainers to the place of his old friend in Lingzhou that Chao Zhuan mentioned. In Huangnam County, he was a young dandy who was like the king of heaven. There was a hint of undetectable haze between his brows. That guy better not have anything to do with that Lin guy. If they were really related to him, even if he was just a small fry, he, Wang Yunshu, would never dare to hit him. Perhaps he could only obediently treat him as a distinguished guest. This wasn't because Wang Yunshu was easy to talk to. There was nothing he could do. In the rich Lingzhou, Wang Yunshu wasn't afraid of almost all the sons of officials and generals. There were only a handful of them. At most, they would mind their own business. The only one he was afraid of was that one. In terms of family background, that guy's father was a primary second-rank official. Not to mention Lingzhou, in the entire Biyao, only the great general and the new protector of Biyao, the great demon Chu, could suppress him. His own father was a few steps behind. In terms of skills, 100 Wang Yunshu wouldn't be able to beat him. In terms of military achievements, even someone as thick-skinned as Wang Yunshu didn't have the nerve to compete in this. As long as Wang Yunshu thought of that Li guy, his mood would become gloomier. When he saw the tall and sturdy man standing outside the house with his arms crossed, Wang Yunshu subconsciously stopped and didn't dare to move forward. This was because he felt an aura that was even scarier than when his sworn brother was angry. It was a strong sense of danger, like a cat meeting a tiger. It was true that Wang Yunshu was domineering and unreasonable, but he wasn't so stupid that he couldn't be cured. It has to be known that outside of Lingzhou, the only young master in northern Liang who was even more ferocious than the one with the surname Li set a few golden rules that everyone believed in. For example, if we wastrels want to live a long life, we have to rely on our merits, servants, brothers, and money. These are all treasured weapons that can save lives but not lives. It is better to rely on our brains to live a good life. At first, Wang Yunshu scoffed at these words. Later on, as he muddled along and suffered some hardships, he began to understand the logic behind these words. It was only when Wang Yunshu truly relied on his reputation to fall to the ground that he realized. Many of his friends fell to the ground and didn't have the chance to repent. For example, there was a good friend who went to Biyao 2 years ago to behave atrociously outside of Biyao. He killed women and chivalrous people. In the end, he was so arrogant that he killed soldiers. In the end, his corpse couldn't even be found. How could this friend's family background in Lingzhou be any worse than his? People with different statuses had different Jianghu in their eyes. In the Jianghu of prostitutes like Chao Jun and Snowsuit, Li Baisher was the leader of their Jianghu. As for wastrels like Wang Yunshu, that fellow was no different from a wastrel immortal in the Jianghu. Moreover, no one could stand shoulder to shoulder with him. Where could you find a wastrel who could go to the throne room of the capital without kneeling to the emperor? Where could you find a wastrel who could bring the old god of swords to the martial emperor city? Wang Yunshu couldn't bear to see others living better lives. However, when it came to some fellows that he couldn't afford to offend, he still knew how to admit defeat. Chao Jun didn't find anything surprising about the retainer at the door who didn't open his eyes. He was just a little taller and more taciturn. However, when she saw the serious expression on Master Wang's face, she started to think about it. Her actions of knocking on the door and pushing it open also became lighter. However, no matter how hard Chao Jun pushed the door, she couldn't push it open. She thought that the door had been locked and was about to open her mouth to remind Master Wang and Snowsuit inside. The retainer slowly opened his mouth and said, "Wait." Chao Jun didn't mind that matter. She didn't even mind that she had a part in it. However, she was afraid that Master Wang behind her would fly into a rage. At that time, not to mention her, even the entire Peach Cheeks restaurant would be implicated. Behind Chao Jun, Master Wang chuckled and said, "Just wait a little longer." Chao Jun really felt like she was being roasted on a bonfire. Every day felt like a year. She didn't know how much time had passed. Behind her, Wang Yunshu's face was so gloomy that it could drip water. "Come in." Fortunately, 2 words came from inside the room. In Chao Jun's ears, there was no more heavenly voice than this in her life. The door of the house was slowly opened by Shui Yi. Wang Yunshu, who had lost his patience, stepped over the threshold with a sinister smile. He saw a person sitting behind a broken zither that he had never dreamed of. Wang Yunshu would recognize her even if she turned into ashes. Then, this big wastrel of Huangnam County made a prompt decision that even he himself admired. With lightning speed, he knelt heavily on the ground, slapped his hands on the ground, and knocked his head solidly on the ground with a bang. Wang Yunshu didn't even dare to fart. He just knelt on the ground. Even if he wasn't a land immortal, he should be at least at the level of 2nd grade master. Chao Jun's mouth twitched outside the room. Snowsuit in the room was even more miserable. She was so frightened that she quickly stood against the wall and covered her heart. She didn't dare to look at him again. What was even more unacceptable to Chao Gu was that the rich young master whom she had mistaken for an ordinary gentry, the one who had accepted the bow of the Grand Prince Wang, was looking at her with a faint smile while holding his cheek with one hand. Chapter 908. I'll be going abroad tomorrow, so I'll be bringing along a notebook with a pleasing font. When the time comes, I'll be posting updates and some photos on the WeChat platform. If you want to follow me, you can search for Fenghua 1985 on your phone or scan the QR code directly. You can find it on Zonghua 1985. Wang Yunshu had just finished his 2nd round with the 2 courtesans of Peach Cheek's house. His body was already like an arrow at the end of its flight. He was trembling as he knelt, but he could only try his best not to move. He was afraid that the slightest movement would cause him to be misunderstood as having ill intentions. Fortunately, Su Fengnian smiled and said, "Yunshu, I just told Chao Jun that you and I have a close relationship. Although the loser of the bet last time has to kneel when they meet, you don't have to get addicted to kneeling. Get up, I heard that you're the number 1 guest here. Aren't you afraid that Peach Cheek's house will look down on you?" Chao Jun's mood today was fluctuating between joy and sorrow. According to her thoughts, Wang Yunshu definitely wouldn't be lying there pretending to be a dead dog because his legs suddenly went soft. The only explanation was that he was a young master from Lingzhou. It was hard to say whether he was Wang Yunshu's old friend, but his family background was definitely far superior to Wang Gongcao's in Huangnam County. If he was a son of an official of the same rank as his father, even if he had been taught an unforgettable lesson, he definitely wouldn't be so submissive to the point of prostrating himself before someone the moment they met. As a little leader, Snowsuit could hide in a daze, but she couldn't. She hurriedly sorted out her thoughts. Apart from the disrespect of sitting on the gray-haired young master's lap and rubbing his buttocks, Chao Zhuan could be considered honest. However, she was only a prostitute from Peach Cheek's house. Most of the sons of officials were officials, and most of the sons of generals joined the army. Naturally, there would be rats that dug holes in the ground. However, Huangnam County definitely had people like her who followed their mother to become prostitutes, but they were definitely few. Su Fengnian didn't pay attention to Wang Yunshu at all. The reason why he remembered this name was because Wang Yunshu's father was not vulgar, Huangnam County's merit officer, Wang Shihua. The Wang family was a big family in Huangnam County with many ancestral shrines. However, the same family name had different ancestors. There were 4 famous families: Shuijing Wang family, Loni Wang family, Lingling Su of Gojosian family, and Zijin Wang family. Administrator Li Gongda was an outsider in Huangnam County. The reason why he was able to make a fortune was that he was not only the son-in-law of Loni Wang family, but also successfully tied together the several big Wang families that were intertwined with each other. If it was said that being an official was a new illness, then the establishment of a family was an old illness that was close to being cured. Wang Yunshu was quick-witted, or else he wouldn't have been able to survive in Huangnam County. He immediately understood that His Royal Highness didn't want to reveal his identity, so he hurriedly stood up and dusted his sleeves in a serious manner. Su Fengnian stood up and gestured to Chao Zhuan to drink. There was wine in the house, but it wasn't good enough to serve young Master Wang. Chao Zhuan wanted to go to the wine cellar to get a few jars of wine that had been sealed for many years, but Su Fengnian said that green ants would do. Chao Zhuan was stunned and didn't dare to question him, but she still subconsciously glanced at Wang Yunshu. This made young Master Wang so angry that smoke was coming out of his 7 orifices. He silently cursed this little leader for being blind. Wasn't this setting him up? He immediately threw a fierce look at her, telling her not to be nosy. Chao Zhuan also knew that she was drawing legs on a snake and hurriedly left. Su Fengnian gestured to Wang Yunshu to sit. Wang Yunshu flatteringly shook his head and hurriedly said that standing was more comfortable. Su Fengnian still carried a chair for Wang Yunshu and stood by the window. Wang Yunshu laughed dryly as he sat down, feeling as if he was sitting on pins and needles. He recited all the names of the bodhisattvas, deities, and Buddhas he knew, hoping that this bad-tempered His Royal Highness would not use peaceful means before resorting to force. In Longqing County, even Zhong Hongwu had been dealt with quite a bit, so His Royal Highness could still steam and roast him whenever he wanted. Su Fengnian leaned his elbow against the window and asked, "How is Uncle Wang?" Wang Yunshu swallowed his saliva and nodded. He's fine." Su Fengnian, who had always been amiable towards Wang Yunshu, thought for a moment and smiled. Uncle Wang comes from a rare scholarly family in Biyao. In Huangnam County, his knowledge is high, no less than that of the prefect Song Yan. It is said that there was once a Wudang Zhenren who observed his physiognomy and gave him a prophecy. What did he say? Wang Yunshu said awkwardly, that unknown old Taoist said that when my father was young, he was addicted to chivalry, riding, and archery. Then he was addicted to the study of scriptures and poems. Then he was addicted to the old immortal Huang and the Western Buddhist land. In the end, he returned to being a sage. I reckon that whether or not the Taoist priest came from Wudang is another matter. I've made a fool of myself in front of your highness. Young Master Su. Su Fengnian shook his head and said, when I was at Wudang Mountain, I did indeed hear such a thing. That old Taoist priest was fully deserving of his title as a Taoist immortal, the old supreme leader Wang Zhonglo. Wang Yunshu was dumbfounded. To be honest, even the Wang family did not take this prophecy seriously. They only saw it as icing on the cake. However, when his father was young, he did indeed ride a horse, carry a sword, and travel to study. He was full of chivalry. However, now that Wang Gongchao was addicted to Taoism, Wang Yunshu had never seen his father practice martial arts with a sword. He had not even seen his father ride a horse many times. As for his travel experience when he was young, Wang Gongchao had never mentioned it in front of his only son. Wang Yunshu also thought that these rumors, which his father was unwilling to talk about, were just the flattery of busybodies. Chapter 909. If it was really the old immortal who severed the Kanglan River with one finger, then it would be incredible. Wang Yunshu immediately had a higher opinion of his father, who made enemies on all sides in Lingzhou's officialdom. Not to mention other things, just the fact that he did not see eye to eye with the administrator made Wang Yunshu feel that his future in this life was bleak. Wang Yunshu's ability to observe people's expressions was even more perfect than Chao Zhuan's. When His Royal Highness talked about the old Wudang leader, his eyes and expression were very gentle, and it was not the kind of feminine softness that made others feel cold in their bones. Of course, Wang Yunshu did not know that between the two mountains, Wudang Mountain and Qingliang Mountain, it could be said that even an immortal sword could not sever it. The green ant wine that everyone was fond of was readily available in Biyao. Chao Zhuan quickly brought 4 pots. Su Fengnian and Wang Yunshu naturally took 2 pots. Chao Zhuan asked for 1 pot herself. Snowsuit was not good at drinking, so the last pot was given to the woman in the mink hat who was pretending to be a servant in green. When she handed the wine over, Chao Zhuan was suddenly stunned. There was such a beautiful person in the world? Could it be that she could compete with Xiangfan City's Li Shuangjia? Su Yanbing had already closed the door and became a door god who did not show his emotions. Su Fengnian held the small wine pot with 2 fingers and gently shook it. He asked mischievously, "Do you still hate Li Hanlin now?" Wang Yunshu drank a mouthful of wine to calm himself down. He had never touched the green ant wine before, but when he drank with His Royal Highness, not to mention the barely tasted green ant, even the dregs of the wine would give rise to the feeling of getting drunk. When he suddenly heard this sentence, Wang Yunshu's weak point, he almost spat out the mouthful of wine. He quickly swallowed the mouthful of strong wine. The wine went down his stomach, but his heart was in his throat again. He carefully smiled bitterly and said, "How would I dare? Young Master Li has already made a name for himself on the border. Don't talk about holding a grudge. If young Master Li comes to Huangnam County to pay respects to his ancestors, I will lead his horse for him." However, before young Master Li left Huangnam County, he said that if he ever sees me again, he will beat me up until even my father won't recognize me. Even if Wang Yunshu wants to apologize, I really don't dare to go to young Master Li and be beaten up. Chao Zhuan thought that she had grasped the mystery. This young man from Lingzhou must have some kind of relationship with the administrator's son, Li Hanlin. He might even be a relative of the administrator. This was why Wang Yunshu was scared out of his wits. Su Fengnian nodded as if he believed Wang Yunshu. He casually asked, "I heard that you have a sworn brother who is a military officer in Huangnam County. He is in charge of a battalion of soldiers and horses. He has 300 to 400 armored soldiers under his command. All of them are light cavalry, and their warhorses are all B grade. They wouldn't be bad even if they were placed on the border of Yuliang. They are far more elite and skilled in battle than the military officers in the county." Wang Yunshu scratched his head and chuckled. He grinned and said with an honest face, "They are just for show. Of course, they are good looking. If they really go to the border and fight with the barbarians, I don't think they will be good. They are all new soldiers who have never fought before. However, to be honest, many of them are the direct disciples of the gangs in Huangnam County. They are not good at fighting, but they are good at fighting. Since young Master Su has asked about these family scandals, I can only tell the truth. If there is anything wrong, young Master Su can tell Wang Yunshu. I will explain it to my father and my sworn brother. In any case, I can guarantee that everything will go according to young Master Su's wishes." Chao Zhuan, who heard every word, was even more surprised. Could it be that this young master from Lingzhou was not as simple as just a descendant of the Li family? Otherwise, how could he give orders to Huangnam County's military and politics? The conflict between rich playboys would break the sky and fight with each other. The two groups of people would invite immortals to fight until the sky was dark. The worst-case scenario would be the soldiers in bright armor being their accomplices. There was no reason for it to be serious enough to shake the foundation of the family. In the impression of the head of the Peach Cheeks house, there really was no young second generation from Huangnam County who could surpass their parents and challenge those old foxes in the officialdom. Huangnam County was Beiliang's granary. The officials who could abuse their power here were not simple. Governor Song Yan's methods were swift and fierce, and Wang Gongchao was also famous for being watertight. It could be said that all of them were like a hornet's nest. Su Fengnian smiled and said, "There are too many rich people in Huangnam County. However, many of them can't find a temple even if they carry a pig's head. In the end, it's because they don't have enough ability." Back then, when they fought for the position of governor of Fengzhou, it wasn't Uncle Wang who lost to the administrator. It was the Wang family from the water school who lost to the Wang family from Lomi. They were suppressed by the administrator for so many years that they couldn't even become the governor of Huangnam County. Then, they were ostracized by Song Yan, who was one rank higher than them. It was already not easy for them to be able to sit on the fishing platform and firmly hold the power to distribute the county official's hat. Now, Governor Song is finally going to move from Huangnam County to Lingzhou to be the governor. Wang Yunshu's expression was complicated. Did His Royal Highness want his father to take a step forward? Su Fengnian didn't keep Wang Yunshu in suspense. He directly explained the stakes to Wang Yunshu. However, the position of governor still has to be filled by an official from the Wang family from Lomi. The rules in the officialdom are passed down from generation to generation. They can't be broken just because they want to. Otherwise, they'll be hated too much. What I'm curious about right now is whether or not your sworn brother has any real ability. Wang Yunshu gritted his teeth and said, "That's my sworn brother." At this point, he glanced at Chao Zhuan, who was listening attentively. Su Fengnian smiled and said, "Miss Chao Zhuan, you and Snowsuit go exchange for some fresh food." Once the outsiders left, Wang Yunshu immediately stood up and carefully worded his words. "Your Highness, my sworn brother is called Jiao Wui. He has some ability and has made a lot of military achievements at the border of Yuzhou. Unfortunately, he was framed by his colleagues. Not only did my father lose more than 10,000 taels of silver, my sworn brother almost didn't make it back to Huangnam County alive. However, our Wang family admits to this grudge. Wang Yunshu won't complain to your Highness. My sworn brother Jiao Wui often drowned his sorrows in Huangnam County in the past few years, but he didn't lose his martial arts. During this time, he often led the soldiers to the river to cut ice and had them jump into the river to freeze. If they couldn't endure it, they had to leave. I'm not trying to deceive your Highness by saying good things about my sworn brother, but I've never seen such a ferocious commandant." Su Fengnian smiled and said, "If you go to the border and take a look, you'll know that it's nothing." Wang Yunshu's face immediately turned red. He said embarrassedly, "Your Highness, please don't blame me. Wang Yunshu is short-sighted." Su Yanbing coughed softly. Almost at the same time, Su Fengnian waved his hand at Wang Yunshu. Then he turned around and stood by the window, looking at the Shitakian. Chapter 9-10. Su Fengnian stood by the window. He turned his head and waved at the confused Wang Yunshu. After he came closer, he said softly, "Go and tell your sworn brother that for your sake, I'll allow him to lead the army into the city. There's a good opportunity for him to earn military merits without doing any work." Wang Yunshu rubbed his hands vigorously and said eagerly, "Your Highness, can I also join in the fun?" Su Fengnian smiled and asked, "Do you have the status of a soldier?" Wang Yunshu also confessed. He blushed and said, "Yes, yes, yes. My father wants to save face. He thinks that I'm not doing my job properly. He takes me out to meet his colleagues during festivals, which makes him lose face. So, he asked my sworn brother for the position of a small squad leader." Su Fengnian said playfully, "A small squad leader?" That's a position that can only be obtained by killing barbarians at the border. Young Master Wang was horrified. He laughed dryly and didn't know how to salvage the situation. Su Fengnian didn't care about it. He waved his hand and said, "Hurry up and discuss with your sworn brother. When the time comes, you don't have to come to Peach Cheek's restaurant. Let the Jiao Wui army split into two. You and him will go to Qing Rong Temple and Lian Tang respectively. If the city gate asks, say that it's Governor Song Yan's order. If anyone asks, say that it's me who asked you to go." Wang Yunshu said goodbye and ran out of Peach Cheek's restaurant with the retainers and evil slaves in the corridor. In order to avoid arousing suspicion, Chao Zhuan and Snowsuit, who were a little further away, looked at each other in dismay. They didn't know what was going on. Su Yanbing walked to the window and looked at Shitakian. He smiled and said, "Congratulations to your highness for your enlightenment while playing the zither." Su Fengnian nodded and lamented, "The world only knows that there are big mistakes in the false realm, but it seems that there are also good times when there are mistakes." Su Yanbing shook his head and said, "His Royal Highness's fake realm is like a painting that a collector would like to borrow for a look. The collector would uncover a corner of the painting and then quickly take it back. This kind of fake realm is obviously less harmful than the artist's own painting going astray. Furthermore, what His Highness has comprehended this time is not the profound finger of inquiring immortality, but the vast azure heavenly phenomenon. This was due to His Highness 20 years of studying, as well as what he had seen and heard in his 3 travels. Reading 10,000 books, traveling 10,000 miles, was the reason why scholars passed down from generation to generation, and had to travel 10,000 miles. Only by doing so would one be able to accumulate sufficient strength and achieve success at a certain point in time. However, what Su Yanbing said is all theoretical. His Highness was able to comprehend the essence of the heavenly phenomenon even after experiencing the false realm and falling realm. Even Su Yanbing admits that he is unable to do so. Su Fengnian smiled and said, "Uncle Su, you are someone who is about to transcend the mortal world and enter the divine world. Don't put in good words for me, a second-level internal force half-baked guy." Su Yanbing dismissed it with a smile. Su Fengnian muttered in his heart. The realm he had just touched upon was too ethereal and mysterious, but it did not seem to be the profound finger or the heavenly phenomenon. It was as if with a hook of his finger, he could make some objects that seemed to be close to him but were actually thousands of miles away break through the air and arrive. However, this kind of realm was fleeting and was not reliable. As for how to grasp the details, it would depend on his future opportunities. Ever since the betrayal of Black Carp in Huangnam County and the secret cooperation of Hans Heng, an old spy with a high position in Beimang, the spy network in the county was rotten. The more experienced a person was, the easier it was for them to be exposed. The spy circle had a habit of catching pairs. There were catching pairs between friends and enemies after their identities were exposed, and there were also catching pairs between people of the same camp. However, the latter was usually only the important literary spies who had reached a certain position had the qualifications to be watched and protected by military spies. Many literary spies did not know who had died for them in their entire lives. Often, they would only be informed of someone's death when they had to evacuate in an emergency. Hans Heng was undoubtedly an important part of Beimang's infiltration into Beiliang's granary. With a literary spy like Hans Heng, whose martial arts cultivation did not match his identity, naturally, there would be the old bastard that Su Fengnian had mentioned lurking at the bottom of the quagmire. However, a cunning rabbit has 3 burrows. No one knew what surprises would be in the 3 nests. In this secret assassination, the Eagle Guard was mainly responsible for Qingrong Temple, where there were relatively few spies. The peregrine falcon was to peck at the fat meat of the entire lotus pond. There were orders from the higher-ups that they could not kill by mistake but not by mistake. These 2 groups of Beiliang killers were very powerful and required a lot of energy, material, and manpower to deal with. Therefore, these 2 groups of men of sacrifice not only wore soft armor and short knives, but also carried bows and crossbows. Shitakian was the least valued of the 3 groups. Some of the miscellaneous people with low ranks were thrown here. Both the peregrine falcon and the eagle guard were sent here. The competition between them was inevitable. Hong Shuwen and Ren Shanyu were in this group. Ren Shanyu was only one of the two small leaders. There was also an old man whose name had been forgotten. He was used to calling him Old Tree Stump. It was said that he had been a man of sacrifice in Biyao for many years. However, until today, he had never been to Biyao Palace, let alone seen the general at close range. He had the air of an old-fashioned man of Jianghu. Chapter 9-11. The manager of the Peregrine Falcon was a sloppy middle-aged man whose surname was Song. This time, other than the two groups of people who were on the lookout and hunting down the fish that slipped through the net, there were 6 people who entered Shiitake Inn. This man with the surname Song pretended to be a rich man from another place and wore a thick gold chain that weighed several kilograms around his neck. Hong Shuwen was his bad friend and Ren Shanyu was Master Song's private foxy woman. The other 3 people were the elites of the Peregrine Falcon. They wore retainer outfits and didn't carry any weapons, but they all had daggers and short hooks hidden inside. Before entering Shiitake Inn, they had roughly communicated with each other about what they were good at and what kind of weapons they used. Being men of sacrifice was not a joke. No one was allowed to be a hero alone. Once there was a battle that was roughly evenly matched, whether there was cooperation or skillful cooperation, the outcome would be completely different. It might even be the difference between life and death. Chai Filu's main target was a woman who had recently become the most popular courtesan. She wasn't necessarily more beautiful than the previous courtesans, but men liked the new and disliked the old. This made her business seem particularly good. Tonight, a lord from Fengyang County spent 700 taels to get her out of the competition, which meant that she would have to spend the night outside. However, he had underestimated the market for courtesans in Shiitake Inn. As soon as he heard that this lord from Fengyang County was going to be kicked out, someone immediately offered 600 taels. The old man had no choice but to ask for 100 taels back and give up on the idea of being kicked out of the competition. He had no choice but to leave a beautiful maidservant in a private residence outside. According to the spy report that Wang Tongke had unearthed, the procuress in Chai Filu who was responsible for matchmaking between the boss and the rich and powerful was also a spy who was born in Beilyang but turned to Beimang halfway through. In addition, the guard instructor and several fellow apprentices of this brothel were real Beimang's men of sacrifice. There were a total of 8 or 9 people in Chai Filu, and only half of them were capable of risking their lives. Therefore, everyone was an expert. The Peregrine Eagle Guard, 16 or 17 people coordinated from inside and outside, so there was no suspense. In fact, it was indeed very smooth at the beginning. The leader of the Peregrine Eagle, Song Gu, and Ren Shanyu went to a room that had been booked long ago. It happened that the top floor of the building was the room where the courtesan received her guests. He called for a half-famous courtesan. The brothel did not reject the guests who brought their own women, but it was not easy to let a famous courtesan play with a stranger. Even if the courtesan herself was willing, the brothel would most likely reject it. This was because they were afraid that the value of the famous courtesan that they had painstakingly raised would fall after making a fuss. Therefore, without a high price, it was impossible to invite her. Hong Shuwen, who was hired by Song Gu, got a big bag of silver. He kept pestering the brothel keeper and shamelessly asked her to make an exception for him. In fact, Hong Shuwen was not bad looking. He was a disciple of a rich family in Beilyang, and he killed people to show his heroic spirit. The woman, who was about 27 or 28 years old, might have taken a fancy to this guy. Even though Hong Shuwen's money was not enough for her, she still agreed. However, she was a brothel keeper in Shiitake Inn and had countless trivial matters to deal with. So, she asked Hong Shuwen to be more efficient and finish the job quickly. Hong Shuwen agreed with a smile and exposed his shortcomings. He said that he was famous for riding fast, which made the woman look at him coquettishly. The spring night was short, and no one thought that life was too long. Little by little, the 3 Peregrine Falcons, who were familiar with the terrain of Shiitake Inn, found the guards who were drinking in the small courtyard and killed them without saying a word. On an embroidered bed, the woman who sensed the killing intent wanted to break Hong Shuwen's spine with her hand. As a result, Hong Shuwen hit her dantian first, and then his 5 fingers were like hooks, strangling her white and tender neck. He watched her die little by little and said with a smile, "I have to take the money back later. We slept together because we liked each other. What's the matter with spending money to buy sex?" Almost at the same time, Song-gu was admiring the sight of a prostitute stripping. He walked up behind her, and she turned around to look at him with a smile. Song-gu smiled and covered her mouth with his hand. He then punched her in the chest, and killed her on the spot. Ren Shanyu, who had been impatient for a long time, jumped on the table, tiptoed, and stuck to the ceiling like a gecko. After confirming the movement upstairs, she tore the plank with her hands and found the position of the spy prostitute. She only saw a charming scene. The woman's clothes were half taken off and her hands were on the table, revealing a large part of her snow-white fat under her waist. An old man in luxurious clothes was raising his hand and was about to slap the 2 pieces of fat. Seeing Ren Shanyu appear out of nowhere, the old man was obsessed with lust and was not too frightened. Instead, he looked at Ren Shanyu's soft breasts with a playful smile. However, the Shitakian prostitute with a perky but had a strong murderous look in her eyes. Instead of lifting her skirt and putting on her clothes, she slapped the table and twisted her 5 fingers slightly. She was like a gorgeous butterfly, spinning toward the uninvited guest Ren Shanyu. The female eagle guard, who did not carry a pair of Xianhua broad axes, was about to block when an arm appeared from the floor. It grabbed the prostitute's slender ankle and pulled it down hard. She was dragged downstairs and disappeared without a trace. Ren Shanyu's face was full of anger. She had a deep grudge against Song-gu. Originally, she planned to assassinate the prostitute, Song-gu to deal with the Shitakian brothel, and Hong Shuwen to support the 3 peregrine falcons. However, Song-gu let Hong Shuwen do the hard work and stayed in the room. The prostitute in the same room did not need to die at all. She only needed to be knocked out. Just when Ren Shanyu was in a trance, the gentleman from the neighboring county, who came back to his senses, quietly stretched out his hand. His palm was facing up, under the table, and he gently lifted the table. The table quickly spun and smashed toward Ren Shanyu. With a sudden murderous intent, Ren Shanyu kicked out and broke the heavy hardwood table. Then she saw an old and gloomy face getting closer and closer. She was hit on the forehead by a palm. Her petite body directly broke through the wall and was slapped out of the building. When she was about to fall on the street, Ren Shanyu, whose consciousness was getting more and more blurred, regretted. If she had the pair of axes in her hands, maybe she would not be so useless. Chapter 9:12. The Taoist temple was the place where Taoism was observed. The monk was the person who left the world. The Taoist temple observed Taoism honestly and the monks left the world dutifully. They should not be too involved in the world. Don't forget, this was Biyao. The culprit who once turned the people of Jianghu into rats was either patrolling the border or watching Biyao coldly from Mount Qingliang. Huangnam County's Qingrong Temple was famous in Biyao for its towering ancient trees. The path to the temple was covered with greenery. It was the best place for the county officials and dignitaries to escape from the summer heat. As the Biyao Palace was built on Mount Qingliang, Qingrong Temple also had the reputation of being cool. Qingrong Temple had always had a deep relationship with the officials of Huangnam County. For example, Wang Shihua, who worshipped Elder Huang, even though he did not have a teacher, he worshipped Taoist Qing Huai as his teacher. Moreover, this old Taoist was Wang Shihua's political enemy, Governor Song Yan, for many years. Song Yan did not alienate his relationship with Qingrong Temple just because Wang Shihua worshipped this Taoist as his teacher. Now that Li Yang had destroyed Buddhism, only Bailiang's Taoism was close to Buddhism. Many monks rushed into Biyao to seek refuge. Qingrong Temple also opened its escape from the summer heat door. Most of them did not refuse. Fortunately, Qingrong Temple was prosperous, otherwise, it would be eaten by so many mouths. Among the monks who stayed in Qingrong Temple, the most famous one was monk Huang Deng of Gangnam-do. In this half a year, the monk and the Taoist had been learning from each other. Both sides debated Buddhism and Taoism and did not close the door. This made the scholars of Huangnam County scramble for it, regardless of whether they could understand it or not. At night, the Taoist temple's night sky was green and close to ink. Only a lantern was hung in one place. The light was dim and there were two unfamiliar songs alternating. At first, it sounded barren and out of tune, but if one listened carefully, one might be able to taste something unique. The old Taoist had white hair and a ruddy complexion. He held a horsetail whisk in his arms and sat on the ground with his back leaning against a pillar. He was none other than Taoist Qing Huai, an expert in the Zhai Jiao Qi. There was an old monk clapping his hands beside him. He was humming a line: snatch the swallow's mud, shave the Buddha's golden makeup, slice the mosquito's leg meat. He was none other than Yellow Lamp Zen Master, who had drifted from Gangnam-do to Biyao during the Buddha annihilation catastrophe. The two old men looked at each other and smiled. Monk Huang Dang asked softly, "My old friend Qing Huai, I heard in Gangnam-do that there was a Guqin belonging to the Lei family of Shishu in Qingrong Temple. Back then, the Lei family followed the king of the fallen country to his death. The hundreds of gyukins that the family had kept were all smashed to pieces. I wonder if this Guqin can still be played." The old Taoist said regretfully, "When I got my hands on it, more than half of the Rao Dianlei had already been burned. Not a single string was left. Every time the remnants of Shishu looked at it with tears in their eyes." Monk Huang Dang sighed, the rise and fall of fate. The old Taoist raised his head and looked at the lantern hanging high. He suddenly laughed and said, "Isn't there a competition between Buddhism and Taoism?" The old monk nodded. After a moment of silence, he asked, "What do you think of the Lord of Biyao?" The Taoist spoke without hesitation. He said, "Of course he has made great contributions. According to the system of our dynasty, there are 6 categories of contributions: founding the country, quelling difficulties, capturing rebels, suppressing the vassals, resisting the barbarians, and conquering the barbarians. The king of Biyao, Su Shao, has 5. His contributions are more than just the Lord's. However, as a subject, if the Lord wants the subject to die, the subject is disloyal." The old monk smiled calmly. The Taoist was looking at the big red lantern, while the monk was looking at a string of wind chimes that were mute even though there was no wind. There was a buzzing sound. Although it sounded like there was only one sound, there were more than 40 crossbow arrows shooting towards the eaves. The old Taoist furrowed his brows, but he didn't withdraw his gaze. With a flick of his horsetail whisk, he wrapped a few crossbow bolts in the white strands of the whisk. Then, with a flick of his wrist, he pretended to use the crossbow bolts to knock against the crossbow bolts. He actually managed to block the rain of arrows outside the eaves. 2 armored soldiers came out of the shadows, one in front and one behind. When they were 10 steps away from the corridor, they changed into a bunch of arrows that flew over the soldiers' heads. The old Taoist stood up. He held the horsetail whisk in one hand and the white silk in the other. He pulled out most of it and threw it into the air. The old Taoist, who was good at observing qi, focused more on the soldiers behind him. The eagle guard was covered in iron armor. His body was as graceful as a woman's, which made him look very unique. Taoist Qing Huai, who was already at the peak of grade 2, had been stuck in a state where he wanted to break through but couldn't. For cultivators, as long as they broke through to the master realm, most of them would reach the mystic realm as soon as they reached grade 1. This was also why Dao sect masters were called little Taoist masters. However, Taoist Qing Huai never showed his strength to outsiders. Even when he did show his strength, he was still around grade 3. Therefore, in Huangnam County, he was only known for his research on Taoist techniques. Taoist Qing Huai used the Dipper steps. Just as the hidden talisman formation was about to be activated, a Buddhist chant sounded. Taoist Qing Huai's face turned cold. He climbed from grade 3 to grade 2. He shouted softly. The iron horse wind chimes jingled and the big red lantern swayed. The old monk chanted again, but the talisman formation was still unable to be activated. At this time and place, the Tao was 1 foot tall and the Buddha was 10 feet tall. Taoist Qing Huai finally stopped hiding his strength. His entire Taoist robe puffed up like a ball. However, the old monk had already closed his eyes. The old monk entered a meditative state and listened to the gentle sound of the bells. The leading soldier stepped onto the corridor and broke through the aura shield with one strike. The price was huge. His entire body was covered in blood. He didn't care about his face and cut open the Daoist's abdomen. His other hand held the hilt of the sword and increased his strength. He charged forward and knocked Daoist Qing Huai, who was determined to multitask, into the wall. The tip of the sword didn't just pierce through the old Daoist's body, it even went a few inches out of the wall. The soldier who was close to the diamond body spat out a mouthful of blood. He raised his arm and wiped the blood off his face. The armored soldier behind spoke. Her voice was clear and crisp. She should be a young woman. Wutangan's secret order allows you to change Qing Rong Temple into a temple. The old monk put his palms together and chanted, Amitabha. Chapter 9:13. The general wanted to test the young man's internal energy, so he continued to gallop forward on his horse for 30 li. In the blink of an eye, he had already caught up with the general, and the two of them were actually riding side by side. The general wanted to test the young man's internal energy, so he continued to gallop forward on his horse for 30 li. The wanderer also followed the general for 30 li without showing any signs of fatigue. The general saw him as a talent and allowed him to establish a sect in his territory. Lotus Pond vaguely became one of the top 3 sects in Feng province at that time. However, following the general's death, this sect leader's personality was perverse, and his martial skill was not high. When he clashed with others, he would either die or be injured. Only then did he move to the neighboring Huangnam County. These years, he had been supporting the sect by himself. When he reached 40 years of age, his temperament changed, and he gradually began to stand firm. However, Lotus Pond was still not as prosperous as it was in the past. Fortunately, in these years, he had accepted a few in-name disciples with good innate abilities. These young talents probably learned from their master's mistakes and were good at interacting with officials in the county. Thus, they reluctantly helped Lotus Pond expand in Huangnam County. Do Yangguan, who had nothing better to do, entered Lotus Pond at this time. He could be considered to be from a well-off family. Since he was young, he liked to fight for power and ruthlessly. However, if he wanted to become a genuine expert, logically speaking, he shouldn't even think about going bankrupt. Once, when the direct disciple of Lotus Pond's sect leader went out to travel, he was surrounded and beaten up by several major sects within the county. The hot-blooded Do Yangguan risked his life to save him and escorted him all the way from the border of Huangnan County to Lotus Pond. Jianghu originally wanted to give him 500 taels of silver to settle the matter, but Do Yangguan knelt on the ground for a day and a night, begging to be allowed to enter the sect. Jianghu refused and coldly said that his talent was mediocre. To the men of Jianghu, this was tantamount to a death sentence. However, Do Yangguan was also a person who would go to a dead end. He would rather not give up the silver that was envied by ordinary people and only wanted to be allowed to squat on the martial arts field of Lotus Pond's outer sect for a month. A month later, Do Yangguan was mercilessly kicked out of the sect. Zhang Si's disciple, who was saved by Do Yangguan, also had a sense of brotherhood. In order to repay Do Yangguan's kindness, he did not hesitate to violate the sect's rules and privately imparted martial arts to Zhang Si. In a fit of rage, Zhang Si expelled him from Lotus Pond. Do Yangguan knelt outside the door and continuously kowtowed for nearly 100 times. In the end, a Grand Master of Huangnan County, who had visited Lotus Pond to compare notes on martial arts with Zhang Si, interceded for him. Zhang Si reluctantly accepted him as an outer sect disciple. Jianghu was like this. Without rules, nothing could be accomplished. This was also the reason why so many nameless people racked their brains to become disciples of the gangs. Whether or not there was a master leading the way was of utmost importance. Even with the same aptitude, there would be a world of difference in cultivation level after a few years. On the roof of a side house, there were 2 young men drinking wine and admiring the moon. One of them was dressed shabbily and sat there drinking slowly. The other was dressed in bright clothes and had a handsome appearance. He had sharp eyebrows and all the items on him were the most fashionable and expensive items in Huangnam County. He was lying on the roof, shaking a small vermilion-colored porcelain wine pot. The wine was green ant wine. However, after changing to this gourd-shaped wine pot, the price was not much lower than white dragon wine. When the handsome man was not smiling, he had the demeanor of an aristocratic family. However, once he smiled, he exposed himself. He laughed and said, "Brother Yen, I really didn't expect that I would be able to drink 6 taels of silver a pot of wine one day." The shabbily dressed man with the surname Yen turned his head and laughed softly. "In the future, even if it's 60 taels of silver a pot, you can still afford it. Listen to Brother Yen, it will be difficult for you to find a woman as good as Miss Song in your lifetime. Don't take it lightly." The handsome man who was about to become an inner disciple of Lotus Pond smiled and said, "Brother Yen, in terms of martial arts, I will never be as good as you in this lifetime. However, when it comes to dealing with women, especially those rich young ladies, you are far inferior to me." The shabbily dressed man sitting and drinking wine shook his head and laughed. "Yangguan, your talent in martial arts is not inferior to mine. Although you have missed the best time to temper your body, Master is a dual cultivator with unfathomable inner strength. As long as you are promoted from an inner disciple to a direct disciple, your future will be limitless. Even if Miss Song is the daughter of the governor, you will be worthy of her. Yangguan, don't despise Brother Yen for being rigid. When you meet a good girl, no matter how much she can't bear to part with you, as a responsible man, you have to make her proud of you. You can't always think that she's such a high and mighty girl who's only obedient to you and only cares about ordering her around like a cow or horse. You've gained face in front of your fellow disciples, but later on, you become a family with her." Do Yangguan's face suddenly turned gloomy. "Brother Yen, if it wasn't for me, you wouldn't have been," the shabbily dressed man said magnanimously, "it's all fate. Moreover, Yen Shijun doesn't regret it. I was adopted by Master when I was young. After following Master for so many years, from Fengyang County to Huangnam County, I have only learned Master's stubbornness. Eldest martial brother has the best perseverance and learned martial arts from Master. Second martial brother has the best talent. Even if he doesn't practice martial arts diligently, his martial arts didn't fall behind. Moreover, when he was with the governor, he was smooth and slick. In all aspects, it was thanks to second martial brother's connections that our Lotus Pond was able to expand in Huangnam County. However, in many things, it is difficult to have the best of both worlds. No matter how you choose, you will not live happily. I also don't know if entering Lotus Pond will help you or harm you. You may find out in the future. However, I hope that you don't know. When you become the son-in-law of the governor, don't mix in Jianghu anymore. You won't be able to make a name for yourself. If you mix in the government or the military, you will have a better future than in our line of work." Do Yangguan was speechless. He sat up and saw a few outer disciples of Fish Pond patrolling near the martial arts field at night. He was somewhat dispirited. Do Yangguan suddenly opened his eyes wide and completely sobered up. Groups of black-armored men climbed over the wall in an orderly manner. After landing on the ground, they bent their backs and sprinted forward. They raised their short crossbows and shot, killing the sentries in front of them like the autumn wind sweeping away leaves. Almost all of the patrolling disciples at the Lotus Pond had their heads pierced by more than 2 crossbow bolts to ensure that they died silently and without any struggle before they died. Apart from the north, the black-armored assassins gradually approached the residents north of the martial arts field from the east, west, and south. What followed was an even more sinister night attack. When Yen Shijun and Do Yangguan stood up and saw the general situation, Yen Shijun immediately shouted, "Assassins are attacking." Do Yangguan was in a daze. He was about to turn around and ask Yen Shijun what kind of enemy Lien Tang had provoked for them to be so ruthless. However, when he turned around, he heard the soft whooshing sound of arrows piercing through the air. Then, he saw a bloody scene. Yen Shijun, who had just warned, had just dodged the attack of a featherless arrow when a second featherless arrow circled in a large arc and pierced through his abdomen from the side. Yen Shijun staggered back, but another arrow came straight at him. Other than the second arrow, which was especially domineering, which he could not dodge, the other 2 arrows were easy to dodge. Yan Shijun turned his head, grabbed the arrow with one hand, and held it upside down. With all his strength, he said, "It's the Northern Liang crossbowman." As soon as he finished speaking, a burly assassin in black armor easily climbed up the building. He looked a little annoyed at Yan Shijun for being a busybody on the roof. He held a crossbow in one hand and a saber in the other as he slashed at Yan Shijun. Do Yangguan had never experienced a life-or-death battle like this before. Although there were fights between gangs in the past where people killed each other and blood splattered everywhere, Do Yangguan was still able to fight back. In the end, it was far less terrifying and cruel than tonight's sneak attack. Not to mention that Do Yangguan had become a spectator. Even Yan Shijun, who was a first-class expert in his eyes, had his arm and shoulder chopped off by that saber. The burly man in black armor had just slashed down with his saber when he suddenly raised his arm and shot a powerful crossbow at Do Yangguan. Do Yangguan's life wasn't meant to end yet. At this moment, he was unexpectedly lucky and dodged the crossbow. He stepped through the roof tiles and landed in the martial arts room. He casually picked up a saber and retreated. Do Yangguan relied on his familiarity with the terrain to move around desperately. Every time he moved, there would be crossbow bolts falling from the roof like a shadow. The black-armored assassin softly exclaimed in surprise. He obviously didn't expect this kid to be so agile. Just as he was about to jump into the room to chase after him, another man in the same armor jumped onto the roof. He held an ox-horn longbow and shot an arrow at a house that suddenly lit up. The window was broken and the owner of the house was nailed to the wall by an arrow just as he lit up the lantern. The man with astonishing archery skills coldly said, "Tonight, we will only catch the big fish. I will stand guard here. You go downstairs. If you lose to those fledgling eagles from Wudong Garden, you know the consequences." A hint of fear appeared in the eyes of the burly armored soldier. He hurriedly acknowledged the order and ran forward. Like a forest spirit ape, he jumped down from the roof and joined up with the other soldiers. They quickly moved forward and headed straight for the main residence. That was the courtyard where Jianghu of Lotus Pond was located. The armored soldiers charged forward with an irresistible force. The outer disciples who were not skilled enough would only end up being cut down like rice. Some of the inner disciples were not completely unable to fight, but this group of armored soldiers did not pay attention to any of the Jianghu rules of killing. In a small area of close combat, in the blink of an eye, they had the advantage of numbers. 2 or 3 cold sabers charged forward, supplemented by the sinister sneak attacks of the short crossbows, and the sturdy soft armor covering their bodies. The weapons and instruments of the Jianghu gangs could not be considered very sharp. As long as it was not a fatal injury, these armored soldiers would not pay attention to it. They would allow you to stab with a sword or 2 sabers, and they would take the opportunity to heavily injure or even kill the Lotus Pond disciples on the other side. It should be known that the peregrine falcon was originally an expert from all kinds of places in the Liang Jianghu. When it came to one-on-one combat, he was an expert. Over the years, he had become proficient in many military formations and had become a pack of jackals and wolves. Compared to a one-on-one assassination, the lethality of the attack naturally could not be mentioned in the same breath. The archer who gave the order on the roof had a cold look in his eyes. He took out a refined arrow from the quiver on his back. Huangnam County's number 1 shrew monkey, Zhang Su, could be considered a troublesome character who was on par with the prince's retainer Lu Qiantang. This time, the peregrine falcon and the eagle guard were traveling together. If they could take this person's head, it would undoubtedly be a great achievement. Ren Shanyu's body floated down. It was unknown whether she was alive or dead. Su Fengnian's eyes were calm. The peregrine falcon? Then he said, "That guy should be the big fish that was caught by the Han Shang." Su Yanbing nodded. Then Chao Jun and Snowsuit found that only the gray-haired young master was left in the room. In Shitakian, the rich old master, who had succeeded in one strike, was about to leave quietly. Then he died quietly. The old man did not even know how he died and who killed him. Chapter 9:14. Ren Shanyu fell on the street, but Su Fengnian did not show up immediately. He counted to 16 in his heart, but still, no one showed up. From Su Fengnian's perspective, he could clearly see that Ren Shanyu struggled a few times. It was impossible for her to even sit up, let alone stand up. Just as Su Fengnian was about to take action, someone from Shitakian finally rushed out of the embroidery house, picked up Ren Shanyu, and disappeared into the alley. It was Hong Shuwen, who was neither an eagle guard nor a peregrine falcon. Su Fengnian's face was clouded. Su Yanbing, who came and went like a ghost, stood back at the window and nodded to Su Fengnian, indicating that Shitakian had been dealt with. Su Fengnian turned his head, and his expression returned to normal. He asked Chao Jun for the detailed location of Wang Yunshu's family mansion, and then asked Snowsuit for the broken zither that was made for flying swords. He held the vase of flower gall with the sound of bells under his arm, and did not say much to Chao Jun and Snowsuit. He told them not to see him off, and just smiled at them, which made the two brothel girls feel flattered. The usually smooth and slick little shopkeeper of Peach Cheek Brothel did not dare to draw legs on a snake. She stood in the corridor and watched the two people disappear around the corner. She noticed the side profile of the gray-haired young man, which was angular. She did not know if it was an illusion, but the young man had a kind of spirit that could make Huangnam County feel like a storm was coming. Chao Jun waited for him to leave and leaned against the porch. She turned her head and saw that Snowsuit clearly wanted to take another look, but she was shy. Chao Jun could not help but laugh at her, and pointed to the window to Snowsuit. The latter was stunned, and then immediately understood. She quickly lifted her skirt and ran to the window. Chao Gu didn't do anything superfluous. She looked at Shui Yi's back. Mother always disliked this girl for not being feminine enough. She couldn't learn how to seduce men, so why didn't she come out? Chao Jun collected her thoughts and began to think about the appearance of the young master of Lingzhou. Would the Peach Cheek Brothel, which had always been suppressed by Shitakian, have a turn for the better? As for the broken zither and the vase that she did not know whether it was genuine or fake, they were all insignificant small things. As long as that person was willing, even if it was a girl like Snowsuit in Peach Cheek Brothel, as long as there was one, Peach Cheek Brothel would give it to him. Outside the building, Su Fengnian boarded a carriage while Su Yanbing drove the carriage to Wang Gongcao's residence in the county. Wang Shihua was the current head of the Wang family of the water school. Following the rise of his mortal enemy, Li Gongda, to the rank of second-rank Dao administrator of Biyao, Long Yi's Wang family was known as the dragon raises its head, arrogant and despotic. The Wang family of Zijin, who had always been on good terms with Long Yi, could no longer tolerate him. The Wang family of the water school took the opportunity to rope him in. With the addition of the Ling Su of Gojoseon, the three families with the same surname had secretly joined forces to contend against Long Yi. With Wang Shihua, who had great accomplishments and knowledge, as the leader, Wang Shihua's days were not as difficult as outsiders imagined. For the past few years, the Wang family's residence had been bustling with people and carriages. Even a few scholars who had recently entered Baliang had come to seek guidance from this great scholar of exegesis. However, it was still uncommon for a carriage to visit in the middle of the night. Although Wang Yunshu had a notorious reputation in Huangnam County for not teaching him strictly, the gatekeeper of the Wang family's residence was someone with hidden authority who was no less than a 7th or 8th-ranked official. If he was the slightest bit careless in his treatment of others, he would be severely reprimanded or even expelled from the residence. Thus, when he saw an unfamiliar young master step down from the carriage, the gatekeeper hurriedly walked out from the side door and walked down the steps to inquire about the matter. However, what surprised the gatekeeper was that this young man was completely different from the other aristocratic sons who were eager to open the gate to welcome them grandly. He actually said that it was fine to wait at the entrance. The gatekeeper immediately understood that he was most likely looking for the eldest young master. In Huangnam County, it was more effective to look for the eldest young master than to look for anyone else. The eldest young master was extremely influential in Huangnam County. Not long ago, an elder of the Ling Su of Gojoseon had hidden a mistress in a golden house and was blocked by a shrew at the entrance. His disgraceful behavior was completely exposed. It was only when the eldest young master stepped forward that the matter was resolved. Since he wasn't here to compare notes with his master, he was most likely a good-for-nothing playboy. The gatekeeper subconsciously looked down on him, saving him some polite greetings. Walking back to the side door, he looked back and saw the young man squatting on the steps next to the stone lion. The gatekeeper couldn't help but think that this young master must have encountered a threshold that he couldn't pass. Otherwise, he wouldn't have used the stupidest method to wait for the eldest young master. In the middle of winter, which young master wouldn't be enjoying wine and beauties? The gatekeeper glanced at the burly man standing at the bottom of the steps. It was a pity that such an extraordinary retainer had met the wrong person and followed the wrong master. Su Yanbing hesitated for a moment. Squatting on the steps one step lower than Su Fengnian's, in the eyes of others, he was overstepping his boundaries. In the cold weather, Su Fengnian put his hands in his sleeves and laughed softly. I've implicated Uncle Su. Originally, I could have introduced myself and then asked Wang Gongqiao for a few cups of hot tea to warm my stomach. But since I'm going to put on a show, I have to put on a good show. Otherwise, I'll have to leave tomorrow morning. The water classic Wang family won't be able to understand the sincerity of a Lingzhou general. Su Yanbing raised his head to look at the sky. You need a heavy snowfall? It seems more sincere. Su Fengnian said in surprise, that's possible. Su Yanbing smiled slightly and said, when I was young, I traveled extensively. My luck wasn't bad and I met some hidden experts. I learned a lot of unorthodox methods. Now that my realm is high enough, I think the heavens will give me face if I ask for a snowstorm in the middle of winter. Su Fengnian asked curiously, does Master Lu Hao have the ability to do so? Su Yanbing thought for a moment and said calmly, that old thief probably can't. It doesn't mean that my realm is higher than Master Lu Hao's. This is probably the principle of specialization in learning. Back then, I went to the South Sea and killed a bunch of qi cultivators. I obtained a few secret manuals. But when it comes to killing people, two Master Lu Hao's won't be of much help. All these years, I heard that Dong Tai is the best in the world when it comes to killing people. I've always wanted to learn from that peach blossom sword deity. Su Fengnian smiled and asked, Li Chungang reached the heavenly phenomenon state before the age of 30. There's also Dong Tai and Uncle Su. All of you seem to have a smooth journey in martial arts. How did you do it? Su Yanbing thought about this question very seriously. Finally, he gave Su Fengnian an answer that made him not know whether to laugh or cry. Just go with the flow. As if he found Su Fengnian's expression funny, Su Yanbing said something that was very suitable for the current weather. Actually, Su Yanbing has always felt that his achievements today are because of this handsome face that didn't lose to His Highness when he was young. Su Fengnian held his belly and laughed. After he stopped laughing, he said helplessly, Uncle Su, you and second brother Yuan will definitely get along. Su Yanbing smiled indifferently and said, that blockhead on horseback spear and lance was indeed taught by me. Su Fengnian was speechless. Chapter 9:15. Su Yanbing suddenly asked, does your highness not know that Yuan Zhuozong started practicing blade techniques at the age of 21? However, after losing to Gu Jiantang, he stopped showing off his blade techniques in front of the world. In the ranking of the experts in the Liyang army, Bailiang had Chen Jibao and Yuan Zhuozong. Now, if Gu Jiantang only had the Thunder Heart, he would probably be at the bottom. However, Gu Jiantang is a cunning person. After so many years, he shouldn't be stagnant. Your Highness, if you still have thoughts about martial arts, why don't you listen to Su Yanbing? Pick two masters who haven't entered the first grade and let them fight willingly. It's a life and death battle. That's why you shouldn't enter the first grade. No matter if it's the first grade or the first grade, as long as you see the greatness of the first grade, your spirit will be more or less affected. Su Fengnian nodded and said, I understand. This is like Administrator Li Gongda. He stands high and sees far. He knows the dangers of fighting in the imperial court, so he acts submissively and can't help but be high-spirited. On the contrary, it was those who were in charge of small counties and counties, who claimed to be the overlords of their own land, who were full of spirit. According to what Uncle Su said, it's easy for second-grade masters to fight to their heart's content. Su Yanbing stopped talking and didn't say anything more. About 2 hours later, the sound of horse hooves hitting the street was especially ear-piercing in the cold winter night. Su Fengnian turned his head and saw a group of cavalrymen galloping towards them. 2 cavalrymen were riding side by side. Even though they were galloping at full speed, the cavalrymen were still able to converse with each other in a soft voice. Their faces were dignified, but they were also forcefully restraining their pleasant surprise. One of the cavalrymen was not wearing armor. Su Fengnian saw this scene and laughed at himself. The ability to hide one's own weakness was not unique to Su Fengnian. Su Fengnian was still squatting in the shadow of the stone lion, shielding himself from the wind and cold. Su Yanbing had already returned to the bottom of the steps. Wang Yunshu urged his horse to gallop. He looked a little tired, but he was more excited. When he saw Su Yanbing's figure, his expression froze. Then, he lashed the horse's buttocks fiercely. He almost rolled off the horse. Just as he was about to kneel, Su Fengnian waved his hand and said, "Forget it. Tell me what happened." Wang Yunshu jogged to the bottom of the steps and asked cautiously, "Shall we enter the mansion and tell His Highness in detail?" Su Fengnian pointed to the seat beside him and shook his head. "I'm going back now. Just give me a rough idea." Wang Gongcao's adopted son, Jiao Wui, ordered the other 20 or so knights to stop a little further away. He got off his horse and knelt on one knee. He cupped his fist and said in a deep voice, "Huangnam County's County Commandant Jiao Wui greets His Royal Highness." Su Fengnian smiled. "County Commandant Jiao, please stand up and speak." Wang Yunshu walked up the steps and squatted down beside Su Fengnian. He began to report to His Royal Highness about the situation of the battle. His sworn brother had gone to Qingrong Temple and coincidentally met a Taoist priest and 2 highly skilled Taoists about 3 li away from Qingrong Temple. They said that they were there to welcome back a few disciples who had obtained crowns and headscarves from other temples. Originally, Jiao Wui would not be too concerned about this. Those middle-aged Taoists were real Taoists from the number 1 temple in Huangnam County. Perhaps they would even greet him with a smile. However, Jiao Wui's purpose for going to Qingrong Temple this time was to obtain riches and honor. Without a second word, he wanted to capture the 3 people. At first, the 3 Taoists surrendered and did not resist. However, when the scouts under his command returned and reported that there were Taoists who had sneakily escaped, there were already 30 light armored cavalry who went to pursue them. The 3 Taoists immediately revealed their ferocity. Luckily, after Jiao Wui had split half of his troops to Wang Yunshu, the 3 Taoists were still in sync with each other. Apart from the dozen or so hidden scouts, each of them had 60 riders a li away. When the 3 Taoists saw that Jiao Wui only had 50 soldiers around him, they vowed to fight to the death. However, they did not expect that after the time it takes for a stick of incense to burn, the next wave of cavalry would swiftly arrive. There were also scouts who secretly sent a message that the 3rd wave of cavalry did not charge forward. Instead, they dismounted from their horses and surrounded them. Out of the 3 Taoists from Qingrong Temple, 2 died and 1 was injured. Unfortunately, the 2 crowns and headscarves were nowhere to be found. On the other hand, Wang Yunshu's side was much more relaxed. He had purely gone to watch the show and had even missed it. The leader of the Eagle Guard had confirmed that Wang Yunshu was His Royal Highness' trusted aide. Only then did he not give Wang Yunshu the cold shoulder and tell him a few things. Only then did Wang Yunshu know that the 143 people in Lotus Pond, regardless of whether they were women, children, old or young, were all killed to the point that they could not be more dead. It could be said that their entire families had been completely wiped out. Even Huangnam County's number 1 expert, Zhang Su, was not spared. Wang Yunshu had also gone to help clean up the mess while he was at it. Zhang Su, who had been famous in Lingzhou for a long time, had died so miserably. Wang Yunshu had nothing to do, so he went to count the corpse that had its head cut off and nailed to a thick pillar. The headless corpse did not have any light injuries. There were 6 places that had serious injuries. Both of its arms had been chopped off at the shoulders, and an arrow had pierced through its chest. The rest of the corpses were strewn all over the floor, and most of them were badly mutilated. Wang Yunshu had vomited out all the delicacies and wine he had eaten that day. Even now, his scalp was still somewhat numb. In the past, he had always felt that he did not treat people as people. Only today did he realize that once he provoked the Biyao peregrine falcons, human lives were truly worthless. Su Fengnian quietly listened to Wang Yunshu finish speaking. He stood up and said with a smile, "After all, Huangnam County is your territory, so you should be more familiar with it. There are still some things left to clean up. If I need to trouble you and Commandant Jiao, I will send someone to your residence to inform you." Wang Yunshu was extremely happy. Jiao Wui bowed and cupped his fists. "This is my duty. I will not regret it even if I have to die for your highness." Su Fengnian walked down the steps. Wang Yunshu asked in a low voice, "Is your highness really not going to stay in my humble abode? Even if it's just a cup of hot wine?" Su Fengnian teased, "All right, you've flattered me enough for tonight. Wang Yunshu, after you return home, tell Wang Gongqiao that if you have the chance to go to Liangzhou, come to my residence for a chat." Wang Yunshu said in fear and trepidation, "Of course, of course." Su Fengnian turned to Jiao Wui and said, "Commandant Jiao, you're quite experienced in managing the army. After the Huangnam County incident, the Lingzhou general's residence is still lacking a commandant. After the new year, bring your original troops over. I'll give you another 600 soldiers and horses. We have to make up a total of 1,000. Jiao Wui, who was nearing 40 and had finally abruptly become rich, had tears in his eyes. He fell to his knees. "Jiao Wui is willing to die for your highness." Su Fengnian patted his shoulder and walked towards the carriage. Wang Yunshu wanted to send him off, but Su Fengnian, who had his back to the residence, waved his hand. Wang Yunshu watched the carriage disappear into the distance. He retracted his gaze and said softly, "Brother, His Highness has gone far." Jiao Wui, however, kept his hands pressed against the ground. He was unwilling to get up. Wang Yunshu turned his head and glanced at the beautiful plaque that the imperial court had bestowed upon him 200 years ago. "Brother, please don't forget about our Wang family in the future." Chapter 9:16. At dawn, a horse carriage drove out of Huangnam County. Hong Shuwen rode a horse to escort the carriage. His expression was languid. Beside him were 2 other white horses. Su Fengnian sat in the horse carriage. Huyen Guanyin was curled up in a corner with sleepy eyes. She was wearing Su Fengnian's fur coat. Last night, when the horse stopped in front of the Wang family's residence, she was alone in the carriage. She lifted the curtain a few times, but she did not see him, who was blocked by the stone lion. She only saw the tall coachman who cherished his words like gold. Later, when she returned to the side room in the courtyard, she probably did not sleep well. On the contrary, she could sleep soundly in the carriage. If she was a female servant, she really did not know who was taking care of who. Huyen Guanyin opened her sleepy eyes. She forced herself to open her eyelids. Through a small gap, she secretly sized up the man who had turned the city upside down overnight. On the way to Huangnam County, she noticed that he would lift the curtain every few hours. It was almost like he had obsessive-compulsive disorder. She also did not know what he was looking at. In her eyes, other than the same willow tree, there was nothing new on the road. However, he never seemed to get tired of looking at it. Occasionally, when he heard the sound of horse hooves brushing past him, he would be even more attentive. Or perhaps it could be said that he was in a daze. Could it be that he could see a flower from a stranger? When they were about to leave the border of Huangnam County, a horse suddenly rushed over. It was the Peregrine Falcon team leader Song Gu who had entered Shitakian. When Su Yanbing heard the order from behind the curtain, he let out a sigh and slowly stopped his horse. Song Gu flipped off his horse and knelt by the side of the horse carriage. When he looked up, he saw the curtain. Hong Shuwen turned his horse around and leisurely circled around Song Gu. He looked down at him and laughed. "Leader Song, why are you here to ask for money back?" In the entire Biyao Peregrine Falcon team, Song Gu was considered a middle-ranked player. Putting aside Jianghu and other literary spies, military spies were men of sacrifice. In the Peregrine Falcon team, there was rarely a change in their official ranks. This was because martial arts could not be achieved overnight. Peregrine Falcons relied on their fists to speak. The capable ones were mediocre while the mediocre ones were at the bottom. Song Gu had the strength of the third rank and was once a commoner in Lichang County, Biyao. Martial arts were the norm in Lichang County. There were 7 major surnames and each of them had their own unique skills. Spear immortal Wang Xiu's wife was from the Qi family in Lichang County. Song Gu's martial arts training was a legend in the marketplace. When he was young, he met a foreign spear master who came to Lichang County for a martial arts competition. That spear master's enemy put a huge bounty on his head, and an ambush began. Not to mention the 2 groups of Jianghu killers who were paid to eliminate disasters, there were even 2 big shots from Lichang County who participated. The master who was close to the Vajra realm killed most of his enemies. After all, it was difficult for a single person to save the situation. Before his death, he escaped to an abandoned house in Lichang County and coincidentally met the young Song Gu who was there to stew dog meat. He taught Song Gu all his life's work. Unfortunately, Song Gu didn't even learn half of it. Later on, when he was impulsive, Song Gu revealed his moves and was recognized by his master's enemy. He had no choice but to join the Biyao Peregrine Falcon. After 10 years of hard work, he was finally able to make a name for himself. Only Chu Lushan and Su Weisheng knew how many first-grade martial artists there were. However, everyone in Biyao knew that there were 14 second-grade martial artists. 2 years ago, there were as many as 20 second-grade martial artists. However, Lu Qiantang died in the battle at the Reed Marsh, and Xu Xiu withdrew. One died at the border, one went missing, and one died on Chen Jibao's way of entering Shu. One person retired successfully and was conferred the title of general. He founded a sect in the southeast of Lingzhou and made a living by transporting grain. In fact, it was a case of the big fish eating the small fish, and the small fish eating the shrimps. Whoever lived to the end would be able to hold the fat bowl of grain transportation. There were no outsiders around. Song Gu, who was kneeling on the ground, said in a deep voice, "Song Gu of the second room of Whisk Club, am risking my life to report to your highness." The curtain did not move at all. Song Gu gritted his teeth. In the matter of Shitakian, Song Gu went against the established plan and made a mistake first. Song Gu does not dare to deny it. However, I beg your highness to listen to my explanation of the reason. Shitakian spies were recorded in the second room of Whisk Club. There were Wang Huanru, a female courtesan from Southern Dynasty's Gusai Prefecture, Chu Ruo, a female brothel keeper from Kuan Prefecture, and several disciples from Gusai Prefecture who infiltrated Shitakian to become guards. At that time, I thought that since Hong Shuwen could temporarily participate in the military affairs of Whisk Club, he must be quite capable. If he was to deal with Chu Ruo, he would have a better chance than the third-class Eagle Guard, Ren Shanyu. A cold voice came through the curtain, "Let's go." Song Gu felt as if he was struck by lightning. He pressed his hands on the ground. Although he deliberately suppressed his tone, it was still difficult to conceal his sadness. "Your Highness." This time, Song Gu did not deliberately slack off. Su Yanbing did not care about a peregrine falcon raised by the second room of Whisk Club. He just drove the carriage forward. Hong Shuwen pulled the reins with both hands and sat high on the horse's back. His body leaned back lazily, and he turned his head to glance at Song Gu coldly. Chapter 9:17. As dusk approached, the dark green city walls of Lingzhou grew taller as the carriage approached. As they passed through the city walls, they could see that it was almost the new year. Red lanterns were hung all over the walls and were lit early. In fact, it was not only here. Many of the city streets were filled with lanterns overnight. It was hard to imagine that this was the handiwork of the administrator, Li Gongda. It was said that the officials and odd job workers of the various yamens were complaining. They were all silently cursing him for being the administrator, yet he still had to flatter a general of Lingzhou who was besieged on all sides. However, when the people of the city went out, their faces were filled with joy. Su Fengnian had the carriage stop at a bustling crossroad. He picked a restaurant and said that everyone would be having dinner outside. The restaurant was overcrowded. The group finally managed to find 2 empty tables on the first floor. Su Fengnian had Hong Shuwen go to the counter and choose a bamboo stick engraved with the names of the dishes. As soon as they sat down, there was a commotion. Huyen Guanyin followed the sound and saw a young man with a protruding mouth and monkey-like cheeks. She did not look any further. Instead, it was Su Fengnian who turned around and sat on the bench. He looked over with a smile. The skinny monkey-like man had one leg on the bench. He picked his teeth as he shouted, "If I were the heir of Biyao and had a great general as my father, if I were to practice martial arts, I would have mastered a peerless martial art since Tide Listening Pavilion is such a large armory full of secret manuals. There are also countless masters. I would have easily mastered the top 10. If I were to lead an army, I could just casually bring a few 100,000 cavalry. I won't brag about killing all the northern barbarians in one breath. Wouldn't Beimang's southern dynasty and Gu Sai Long Yao have long been wiped out?" Someone immediately joined in the fun and poured cold water on him. "Are you for real? I remember that there are 300,000 to 400,000 barbarian soldiers at the border of Liangmang. They are not made of paper. Fortunately, only our Biyao can stop them. Moreover, Beimang has the military god Tuoba Bodhisattva. The fall of the southern dynasty is meaningless as long as Tuoba Bodhisattva is gone. However, this guy is fierce in battle. What if he goes crazy and takes your head without regard for his life? This guy is only inferior to old monster Wang of Wu City in the world. Isn't taking the head of a general among millions of soldiers easy?" The skinny monkey-like man shrank his neck when he heard the name Tuoba Bodhisattva. "Then let's let Beimang go for now. We'll lead all the Biyao cavalry to attack the east. It's only 2,000 to 3,000 li. Other than General Gu Jiantang on the eastern border, the 2 elite troops of Yan Qi Prince Zhao Bing and Guangling Prince Zhao Yi are far away and can't take care of them. Old man Gu was suppressed by our great general in the past and is no match for him now. We'll directly charge into the palace and sit on the dragon throne. Who cares about purple beard and blue eyes Zhang? No matter how smart he is, he's just a civil official who doesn't even dare to kill a chicken. If he dares to stand in front of me, I'll immediately give him a big slap and make him lose his sense of direction." Someone immediately followed up with a face full of anger and said sarcastically, "It's just that our prince is timid and useless. He went to the capital for nothing and didn't do anything. At the very least, you should be able to bully a few of the most popular courtesans in the capital. God knows if this grandson went to the capital and gave the officials and lords a lot of Beiliang's hard-earned money. I heard that on his way to the capital, there were dozens of boxes of gold, silver, jewelry, and antiques. It's absolutely true. This little bastard who only dares to bully others in his own nest is now the general of Lingzhou. He must have been taught a lesson in the capital and wants to return to his own territory to abuse his power." The skinny monkey-like man lowered his voice slightly and said mysteriously, "Did you guys hear? Our Royal Highness was originally going to return to Biyao with his tail between his legs. However, the general couldn't stand it anymore and personally made a trip to Biyao. Only then did he manage to bring back 2 daughters-in-law for this disappointing son of his. It's said that they are both women from Qingzhou. For the general to have such an eldest son, he really has 8 lifetimes of bad luck. If the little prince becomes the next king of Biyao, that would be a great thing." A young man who looked like a scholar said with a heavy Jizhou accent with a smile, "Choose the eldest son over the concubines. Choose the eldest son over the youngest son." An old man at the next table sighed, "That's right. The little prince reincarnated too late." Because Su Shao only married one princess, there was no distinction between the eldest son and the concubine that was common in other noble families. In the past, everyone felt that even though His Royal Highness was absurd and heartless, he was still the eldest son. The second son, Su Longxiang, was also born silly. As for who would inherit the throne and who would become the king of Biyao, there were no objections. However, the little prince led the dragon elephant heavy cavalry and broke through the border. His military achievements were outstanding. He personally led the troops and led the charge. No one disagreed with him. It was rumored that Yan Wenluan, Zhong Hongwu, and the rest of the old generals were full of praise for the little prince. An undercurrent was surging. This undercurrent had no doubt converged with the storm in Lingzhou. Su Yanbing naturally ate at the same table as Su Fengnian. He did not hesitate when he ate. Ever since he was by Su Fengnian's side, he had never had a fawning expression. He did not pay attention to the noise in the restaurant. Huyen Guanyin did not like the dishes of the Central Plains. When she heard the words of the man beside her, she pricked up her ears and did her best to listen clearly. Then she carefully bent over to see if Su Fengnian was angry. However, she only saw a calm smiling face. Su Fengnian turned around and wolfed down the food. When he was full, he glanced at Huyen Guanyin. She nodded, indicating that she had eaten enough. After paying the bill, the group walked out of the restaurant. Su Fengnian looked at the setting sun and silently walked towards the carriage. Su Yanbing sighed in his heart. Only he could understand the complicated thoughts of the young man in front of him. If there really came a day when Biyao was broken through by the Beimang heavy cavalry. Then if there were a few more Biyao people like this in the restaurant, as the new king of Liang, Su Fengnian would feel less guilty. Chapter 9:18. Finally, they returned to the Lingzhou general's manor. When Hong Shuwen got off his horse, he loudly shouted that they were home. Then, Hong Shuwen's eyes widened. A large group of small fries were sneakily hiding in the empty space on the right side of the general's manor where the stone lion was. Hong Shuwen's family was wealthy. With one glance, he could see that these people were pretending to be Jianghu heroes and had come to the general's manor to scam a living. If they weren't wearing gray mouse fur or raccoon fur, they were exceptionally new. They were all the most worthless types of fur. Among them, there were two people whose fur was exactly the same. It was clear that they were trying to make themselves look good, but unfortunately, they were in the same shop and had bought leather clothes that were currently being sold at a low price. Hong Shuwen moved closer and casually looked around. Among the 20 to 30 men, he did not find a single one with the demeanor of an expert. This made Hong Shuwen, who was prejudiced against Jianghu people, feel very bored. Just as he was about to turn around, His Royal Highness was already standing shoulder to shoulder with him. Hong Shuwen hurriedly took a step back without leaving a trace. Su Fengnian smiled and said, "Heroes, who has the strength of a 4th level, please step forward." There were 9 levels of martial artists. 4th level was a large dividing line. To be able to reach the 4th level, one could be considered an expert in a province. In a county, one could practically do whatever they wanted. In a small place where martial arts were not strong, one could establish a sect. Not to mention becoming rich, at the very least, one could become a tyrant. Hong Shuwen made a sound of surprise. He originally thought that it would be lucky if there were 2 or 3 4th-level experts among this group of half-baked heroes. He did not expect that there would be 14 or 15 people walking out at once. Su Fengnian saw a man whose eyes were wandering. He threw a look at Hong Shuwen who was next to him. Hong Shuwen took a few steps forward. His murderous aura was immediately awe-inspiring. He leaped up, pressed his hands on the hilts of the 2 Biyao sabers at his waist, and slammed his knee into the man's chest. The man who was caught off guard was about to receive a heavy blow when a skinny old man who had not stepped forward slid a few steps forward. The soles of his shoes were less than an inch off the ground. He pushed away the man who wanted to make up the numbers with one hand and put his other hand on Hong Shuwen's knee and pressed it down. Hong Shuwen, who was falling down, sneered. The saber in his right hand suddenly slid out of its scabbard. The light was so dazzling that many of the onlookers subconsciously squinted their eyes. Unfortunately, most of them could not see the saber of this young retainer from the general's residence. They could only vaguely see the shabby old man bending sideways, clenching his fists, and punching towards the chest of Hong Shuwen who had not yet landed on the ground. The old man's fists whistled like a gust of wind. Hong Shuwen raised his arm to block and slid back 5 or 6 steps on the ground. He stabbed the saber in his right hand into the ground and forcibly stopped himself. Shaking his left wrist, Hong Shuwen turned his head to look at His Royal Highness with a smile. His eyes were asking if he could use his full strength. Su Fengnian shook his head and smiled. Other than this old gentleman, who else is a third-level expert? Step forward openly. Biyao said that I like to kidnap women. Since none of you are as pretty as flowers and jade, there is no need to worry. A few fourth-level experts in their prime grinned. His Royal Highness was a straightforward person. Some of the men who had tried to bluff their way through also took a few steps back. Other than the old man from the Yang family from Lichang County who was proficient in long fists and cannons, there were 2 other tall and sturdy men who were skilled in external martial arts. They stepped forward and announced themselves. Su Fengnian nodded with a smile in his eyes. Then, he gently raised his chin and called out to the crowd behind him, "Brother, you clearly have the strength of a second-level expert. Since you are already here, why are you not willing to show yourself? Could it be that you want me to open the door for you before you are willing to come in?" The crowd parted. Only then did the crowd notice a middle-aged man in ragged clothes. He was crouched against the wall and reeked of alcohol. There were several wine gourds of different sizes scattered around his feet. When he raised his head, the scars on his face made him look like a ghost. This ugly man seemed to have damaged his throat from years of drinking too much. He hoarsely said, "May I ask if your highness has truly entered Northern Mang alone, carried 2 heads, and retreated unscathed?" Su Fengnian smiled. Everyone felt their eyes blur and then they heard a loud explosion. After the dust rose up, they saw His Royal Highness standing at the foot of the collapsed wall and clapping his hands. The drunkard who was pushed into the wall by His Royal Highness sat on the ground with a calm expression. Many people found it strange that the Crown Prince was so polite to everyone except for this rank 2 master, who should have been worshipped highly, to be so merciless. There were some Jianghu people with bad eyesight who felt that His Highness hired someone to act. If not, if that drunkard was really at Master Realm, why would he be forced back into the wall so easily? The few grade 3 experts saw through the rough situation and were shocked to the extreme. Su Fengnian turned around and smiled at everyone. "Everyone is a guest. No matter if you want to enter or not, everyone will be given 300 silver. He then instructed the 3 white horse followers, Tianguan, Yenru, "The 2 of you go and collect the silver from the steward. Then, have the steward help the brothers who have entered the residence find a place to stay. Shuwen, later on, take the righteous men to find the best restaurant in the city for a meal. If you spend too little money, I will not forgive you." The men who weren't able to enter the Lingzhou general's manor looked at the people who entered and were filled with envy. Su Fengnian wasn't in a rush to leave. He just stood on the streets and chatted with these people who weren't even grade 4. He asked them where they were from, what sect they were from, and whether or not they were planning to join the army. Regardless of whether these people had slandered Su Fengnian in private in the past, when His Highness was standing in front of them, they all felt uneasy. Those who were lucky enough to speak 2 or 3 sentences in front of them almost blushed. They were extremely flattered. The gray-haired young man in front of them was the future local emperor of Northern Liang. He had hundreds of thousands of soldiers in his hands. When he talked about it with his family members, especially his brothers in the underworld, they would be so shocked that their eyeballs would fall to the ground. Some people couldn't help but be confused. They all said that His Royal Highness was not just tyrannical in Biyao. In reality, he was tyrannical everywhere. For example, on the Guangling River, he relied on the old sword god to fight against the thousands of cavalry of Prince Guangling Zhao Yi. Such a high and mighty figure, why did they feel that he did not put on any airs when chatting with them? On the contrary, he was unbelievably amiable and approachable. If they did not think about his illustrious identity and his outstanding appearance, just based on his attire and manner of speech, it seemed that he was not much different from a well-off scholar from a small county. A group of carriages and horses that could be said to be extravagant rushed towards the Lingzhou general's manor. This made the gatekeeper of the administrator's manor, who was already prepared to welcome important guests, feel a bit depressed. Coincidentally, someone lifted the curtain and looked toward the Li Manor. The gatekeeper looked over and shivered. He slapped his head and quickly ran toward the back of the manor. Damn, the mortal enemy that had fought with his master for half his life in Huangnam County had actually appeared in the capital of Lingzhou. In the past, when the officials of the 6th rank and above in the 7 counties of Lingzhou needed to rush to the administrator's manor to discuss important matters, the person sitting in the carriage would always use illness as an excuse to not come out. Su Fengnian heard the unusually loud sound of horse hooves and turned his head. Seeing the 3 carriages in a row, he understood. In the end, he told the good men of the Jianghu who were not able to become retainers of the Lingzhou general's manor. The general idea was that there were 2 paths they could take. One was to join the army. As long as they passed the test, it would be easy for them to become a squad leader. The other path was even easier. The various yamans of Lingzhou were in urgent need of a large number of Jianghu men with great martial arts. They would come out of the mountains to temporarily take up a position that was not considered to be an official. It was similar to the military and penal departments that were directly under the jurisdiction of the county magistrate. It could be considered getting rid of evil and bringing peace to the people. In the future, as long as they had some achievements and showed real merit, the Lingzhou government would definitely give them priority in promoting them. When everyone heard that it was only the Lingzhou government that wanted them and not going to the border to fight for their lives, they felt relieved. Many of the men who were passionate about fame all had smiles on their faces. They looked at each other and saw the eagerness in each other's eyes. After Su Fengnian calmly finished talking about the important matters, he smiled and told them to eat and drink well. Furthermore, if they really became part of the Lingzhou government in the future, they were welcome to be guests in the general's manor. Su Fengnian turned around and slowly walked towards the 3 carriages. After the owners of the carriages walked down, they all walked faster. When they were 5 steps away, the 3 scholars of different ages knelt down at the same time. Huangnam County's Wang Shihua greets His Royal Highness. Huangnam County's Wang Zhenlu greets His Royal Highness. Huangnam County's Wang Lifting greets His Royal Highness. Chapter 919. The 3 of them were the current masters of Huangnam County's water classics Wang clan, spiritual Su of Gojouzian clan, and Zijin Wang clan. Wang Shihua was Wang Yunshu's father, the current merit officer of Huangnam County. He had an elegant temperament and had the style of an ancient sage. The water classics Wang clan was famous for having a rich collection of books. The famous scholars in the clan were especially good at exegesis and annotations. The Imperial College's new left chancellor, Yao Baifeng, was determined to turn the family's learning into national studies. When he was young, he concealed his identity and became a private tutor of the water classics Wang clan. It was so that he could be close to them and read books. Later on, Yao Baifeng's reputation rose and everyone knew that he was knowledgeable. He became more determined with age and was regarded as the master of the northern literary world. Together with the 2 masters of the Song clan, he often borrowed books from the old master of the Wang clan. The gray-haired Wang Zhenlu came from the spiritual Su of Gojouzian clan. There was a great Jinren who ascended on a crane. The Wang clan of Zijin's history was not as good as the other 3 princes of Huang and Nan. However, due to the fact that 3 princes of Zijin had appeared in the previous dynasty, there was a scene where 3 generations of the Wang clan of Zijin sat in the same court. Unfortunately, it was short-lived. In the current era, the Wang clan of Zijin did not attract much attention. The current Wang clan head, Wang Lifting, was not only young, she was only 3 years old. She was also famous for being unorthodox. The outside world did not know how such a disreputable young man, who was as famous as Wang Yunshu, could suddenly become the head of the Wang clan of Zijin. Su Fengnian was not arrogant enough to make the 3 masters kneel on the street for a long time. He let them get up and brought them into the residence. They agreed to rest for a night and talk about the details tomorrow. In the Li mansion, the administrator, Li Gongda, was tending to a hollyhock in the garden. When he heard the steward say that Wang Shihua had gone to the general's mansion to see the crown prince, along with the old and frail Wang Zhenlu and the immature Wang Luting, Li Gongda's face darkened. He sneered and said, "Old he, don't you think some people are strange?" You give them 1 copper coin every day, and when you don't give them any more, they will jump and curse. You slap them every day, and when you stop, they will be grateful. Others say that Huangnam County has produced 4 princes and that it is a blessed land with good feng shui. However, in my opinion, this Huangnam County is a place full of white-eyed wolves. They only remember the beatings and not the good. I have only been gone for a year, and they have already begun to forget favors. If I did not pave the way and build bridges for them back then, how would they be where they are today? Let's not talk about the other 3 families. Let's talk about the Wang clan of Longi. It is true that I have used them to achieve a meteoric rise, but what I have returned to Longi over the years is more than what they gave me back then. Father-in-law waited until I became the governor of Fengzhou before he was willing to eat his first New Year's Eve dinner with me, a son-in-law from a humble family. Now, he is begging to bring his family to this residence so that 5 generations can live under the same roof. The steward surnamed he was scared into silence by the master's words. In the past, he had been a servant of the Wang clan. Later, because Li Gongda had not yet achieved meteoric success, he was the only small steward who had invited the son-in-law of the Wang clan to drink. Even steward he himself could not believe that Li Gongda would reach the position he had today. Back in Huangnam County, Li Gongda was not accomplished in literature or martial arts. He was looked down upon by countless people. To put it bluntly, even the female servants and coachmen did not look him in the eye. The reason why steward he had taken the initiative to invite Li Gongda to drink wine was because he had received an unexpected reward. After searching through the entire Wang clan, he felt that only Li Gongda was suitable for him to brag about and also be able to invite him. Later on, when one person achieved the Tao, even his chickens and dogs rose to the heavens. Steward he became one of the earliest elders of the Li clan. At first, he purely thought that the master would take revenge for the smallest grievance and repay the kindness of a drop of water. Later on, he realized that it was not that simple. The master wanted the Wang clan members who had looked down on him in the past to regret their actions. In reality, the master did not view him, He Cheng, in a new light. Li Gongda had sent people to expose and impeach Song Yan regarding the matter of the obscene sacrifice. Li Fuzhen had personally gone to the Huangnam County Governor's manor. He wanted his daughter to be honest with Song Yan on his behalf in order to maintain their relationship. Li Gongda originally believed that Song Yan would understand his good intentions. Of course, he also had the intention of knocking Song Yan down. If Wang Shihua became the Huangnam County Governor, Li Gongda, who was about to lose the Lingzhou provincial governor, did not want to implicate the Li clan's backyard in Huangnam County. However, his daughter did not have much experience in politics, but Li Gongda predicted that she would definitely bring Guo Fufeng along to Huangnam County to meet Song Yan and Song Huangmei. With him personally negotiating, it was better than his muddle-headed daughter doing bad things out of good intentions. Also, Li Gongda already knew that many of his students, who were familiar with the dog hole, had begun to flirt with Guo Fufeng. This young man looked shrewd, but he was actually impatient. Li Gongda also wanted Song Yan to give him the cold shoulder so that Guo Fufeng would know that if he truly wanted to enter the Li clan circle, he would not be able to put in enough effort. The hearts of parents in the world were really pitiful. It was because before children became parents, it was very difficult for them to understand this painstaking effort, which was why they were pitiful. An outer courtyard manager hurriedly ran over with a weird expression on his face. "Master, the young miss has returned." Li Gongda thought about it for a while before impatiently saying, "Let that person in." The manager lowered his head, his face filled with joy. Unexpectedly, Li Gongda laughed. "Jia Gui, that young man gave you a few dozen taels of silver?" Jia Gui immediately took out a silver note from his sleeve and bowed as he ran over to the administrator. He did not waste any time and honestly said, 50 taels. Li Gongda waved his hand and glanced at the note. His face was helpless as he muttered to himself, "This silly girl, using the silver that father gave you to fool him." Li Gongda's eyes narrowed as he slowly placed the note into his sleeve. "Surnamed Gua, you dare to accept this note? Aren't you afraid it will burn your hands?" One of the managers of the inner courtyard, He Cheng, took the initiative to leave. Li Gongda, who was alone, continued to deal with the hollyhock that was as tall as a person. He stretched out 2 fingers and broke off branches and leaves, sometimes nodding and sometimes shaking his head. After the general's mansion housed the first batch of Jianghu people to follow the dragon, the 3 Wang family heads from Huangnam County stayed. Finally, there was some life. Su Fengnian sat in the study, using the afterglow to appreciate a precious calligraphy and painting with dense inscriptions. Huyen Guanyin tiptoed into the study, holding the pot of phoenix spirit that was criticized as a chrysanthemum made with both hands and placing it on the window. With the light blocked, Su Fengnian did not raise his head and waved at her. The calligraphy and painting on the table were the original works of the former Biyao tycoon, Yao Baifeng. Yao Baifeng had been out of power for a long time and had only been in the court for a short time. It was not that Su Shao did not think of asking him to come out of retirement, but Yao Baifeng had always ignored him. Su Fengnian touched the calligraphy and painting with his fingers and sighed softly. What did it mean to win the hearts of the people to rule the world? That was all fake. The real thing was to win the hearts of the people to rule the country. Su Fengnian raised his head and saw the back view of Huyen Guanyin. She stood by the window in a daze. The yellowish afterglow scattered, making her look like a flying angel in the painting. Su Fengnian was well aware that she was his bait. There were also a few qi cultivators in Biyao. They must have noticed that she was not ordinary. The reason why Su Shao hid her here was partly because she was a rare commodity worth hoarding. More importantly, he wanted to let her carry the fate energy and transfer it all to Su Fengnian, who had no fate energy. Fate energy seemed illusory, but it was actually very simple. For example, the so-called husband and wife look alike in the world. That was the result of a married couple living together day and night and complementing each other's fate energy. Huyen Guanyin was often listless. Other than the surface feeling that she was not acclimatized to the environment, the root of it was because her abundant fate energy was stolen by Su Fengnian. Su Fengnian kept the scroll and mocked himself. It's hard to guard against a thief in the family. As for those Jianghu people who took the initiative to rely on the Lingzhou general's manor, whether or not there were loyalist spies outside of northern Liang, Su Fengnian had plenty of methods to expose their identities and make them wish they were dead. Huyen Guanyin exclaimed. Su Fengnian raised his arm to stop a messenger falcon. The contents of the secret letter caused Su Fengnian's pupils to suddenly contract. The Lu family in Qingzhou had encountered an assassination attempt. Just to protect Lu Qingyan, 4 of the first-class falcons of the Fushui Society had died. The Taming Cloud Inn, which had been in charge of setting up the situation in Qingzhou, had suffered even greater losses. Almost all of its elites had died. Obviously, Li Yang and Beimeng did not want to see the Lu family in Qingzhou and the Su family become in-laws and then take root in Beiliang. As long as Lu Qingyan, who had the potential to become the consort of the king of Beiliang, died, the Lu family would completely give up on the idea of changing owners. As for which party was willing to sacrifice everything to prevent the Lu family from dying, the secret letter only said that it was unclear. Su Fengnian lit a thick red candle and burned the secret letter inch by inch to ashes. A breeze blew through the window. The candlelight flickered and scattered the ashes. Huyen Guanyin saw that the letter had long been burned, but he still maintained his attentive posture of 2 fingers close to the candle flame. Su Fengnian flicked his fingers and walked to Huyen Guanyin's side. His eyes were obscure and difficult to understand. He gently looked at a raised eave of the administrator's residence. Huyen Guanyin heard him say to himself, "Perhaps I was wrong from the beginning." Chapter 920. The 3 family heads of Huangnan County stayed in the Lingzhou general's manor. They were not far from each other. Other than their trusted retainers, the 3 of them did not bring anyone else into this brand new official residence with a horizontal board. His Royal Highness allowed them to rest for a night, which made Wang Shihua's heart tighten. This was clearly to give the 3 families enough time to communicate. Wang Gongchao, Ling Su of Guozhouzian Zanlov, and Zijin Wang Lifting all rushed from their families to Lingzhou City at dawn. Apart from a careless lunch midway, they roughly communicated. Although they agreed to take care of each other, they were still wary of each other in their hearts. It was very difficult for them to advance and retreat together. When it came to the ups and downs of a large family, no matter how good their relationship was in the past, they had to carefully weigh the pros and cons. Wang Shihua, who was praised by Yao Baifeng as having the talent of 3 provincial governors, ate a dinner that could not be considered sumptuous. He was not in a hurry to agree to Wang Zhenl's appointment. Instead, he went out for a walk alone. Not long after he went out, he saw the junior Wang Lifting, who was also leisurely strolling. Wang Shihua was a little touched. To be able to keep his composure, the younger generation would surpass him in time. The two of them nodded and smiled as they brushed past each other. Wang Shihua walked along a corridor beside the water with his hands behind his back. The water flowed towards Jinhu Lake. Within Lingzhou City, there were not many residences that had the ability to draw water from the lake into their own courtyards. The administrator's manor next door was naturally one of them. Wang Shihua had an idea and turned into a small path close to the wall. Through the hole in the wall, he could see the inside of the Li Manor. Wang Shihua suddenly stopped. Coincidentally, on the other side of the wall, there was an official that he could not be more familiar with who was also approaching. After looking at each other, Wang Shihua, who had his hands behind his back, smiled. "Lord Li, why are you so free and elegant? I heard that Lord Li has found a son-in-law who is outstanding in terms of knowledge, character, and background. Congratulations, congratulations." He only addressed Li Gongda as Lord Li, but did not refer to himself as a lowly official or a lowly official. It was enough to show the arrogance of Huangnam County's merit officer, Wang Shihua. Li Gongda patted his sleeves and replied with a smile, "This official doesn't need to rely on some son-in-law for retirement. In any case, I have a son who can be considered to be quite promising. He's able to earn military merits on the border without being involved. Wang Gongchao, you should take it easy." Wang Shihua nodded and said, "There are many great men on the border. Young Master Li is both in the battlefield and in love, so naturally people can't help but be envious. That son of mine has no ability and only knows how to hook up with girls from the brothels. He doesn't have such good fortune." Everyone in Beiliang knew that the administrator's son, Li Hanlin, used to be popular with both men and women. Almost every time he went out, he would be intimately accompanied by a handsome young man. Although the prodigal son had turned over a new leaf and no one doubted the authenticity of the crossbowman's military merits, the evil young Master Li had committed too many heinous crimes. Tonight, he was mocked by Wang Shihua. Li Gongda did not refute and bent down. Wang Shihua was wondering why the administrator would admit defeat this time. He did not expect that after Li Gongda stood up, he would directly throw a handful of soil at Wang Shihua's face. It didn't hurt, but Wang Gongchao, who had always been regarded as the cultured sect master of Lingzhou, had never been humiliated like this before. For a moment, he did not know how to react and was stunned on the spot. Li Gongda laughed and said, King Wang Shihua, you're the best at putting on an act. I've wanted to beat you for a long time. There are no outsiders today, only you and I are enemies. His Royal Highness, why are you here? Hearing this, Wang Shihua unconsciously turned his head. In the end, there was no one around. Where did His Royal Highness come from? When he turned his head again, Li Gongda threw another handful of soil at his face. Wang Shihua was unable to restrain his anger. He pointed a finger and scolded angrily, Li Gongda, the three immortals of virtue and speech. As an important official on the battlefield, ask yourself honestly, is there any one of them? You've really tarnished the word merit and virtue. You're a cautious and fierce person. Do you really think you can die of old age? Li Gongda carelessly rubbed his nose and then pointed a finger at the top of his head. He said disdainfully, everyone respectfully calls you Third Governor Wang. 3 governors, isn't that the size of the official hat on my head? Don't talk big in front of me. Just tell me who's the highest official today, and who's the one who made you not take a single step forward all these years and obediently become a county's merit officer? Wang Shihua sneered and said, talking to you about passing on the torch, talking to you about the seeds of learning, is simply playing the lute to a cow. Li Gongda chuckled and said in a low voice, we're like chickens talking to ducks. In the end, we're still the same kind of people. Let's not laugh at each other. Wait until you become the second Ya Baifeng one day, then you'll have the qualifications to talk to me about learning and merit. Wang Shihua flew into a rage and said, Li Gongda, who's the same kind of person as you? Li Gongda raised his hand. Wang Shihua, who had suffered twice, immediately dodged. Only then did he realize that there was no soil in the administrator's hand. Li Gongda said that playing with Wang Shihua was as easy as playing with a monkey and left. Logically speaking, Li Gongda, who had returned with a great victory, should be proud of himself. However, Li Gongda, who was flushed with success in Biyao, did not have the expected jubilation. Instead, his face was as gloomy as water. Wang Shihua's expression was uncertain at first. However, when Li Gongda's figure disappeared into the distance, the corner of Wang Gongcao's mouth quietly curled up. There was no longer any trace of anger. He said softly, Li Gongcao, let's see how long you can run rampant. Su Fengnian received the second secret letter of the day. It came from an old turtle in Lingzhou. Even Su Fengnian did not expect it to be a level 4 Jianghu hero who had entered the Lingzhou general's mansion. It turned out that before everyone gathered at the door, the Lingzhou peregrine falcon had obtained the background of most of the people. Some were rough, some were detailed. The only thing missing was the drunkard who had appeared out of nowhere. It was probably because the foreign spy also felt that swaggering into the mansion was too suicidal. No one in the secret letter was suspected of being a spy. Most of them were Jianghu people who had criminal records in the government. This was not strange. In Jianghu, it was impossible to become famous without killing or being killed. Su Fengnian was carefully reading the secret letter in the study. The turtle nicknamed Yama's knife was kneeling on the cold floor. He did not move at all. Su Fengnian put down the secret letter and closed his eyes. After a long silence, he opened his eyes and said to the person, You don't have to worry about the drunkard. However, have Chu Lushan immediately investigate the level 4 Lu Bozong and the level 3 Sun Chun. The backgrounds of these two people are too clean and too detailed. From birth to practicing martial arts to becoming famous, it seems that there are traces that can be traced. However, the more it is like this, the more uneasy it is. Of the two people, Sun Chun looks older. However, he is only 29 years old. Lu Bozong is 32 years old. They are the two youngest. Although I am not a spy, I know that as long as you are willing to put in the effort, it is easy to get an identity before the age of 15. Then, you can train them carefully for more than 10 years. It is almost impossible to leave behind any traces. I even suspect that there is a problem with their family. I will have to trouble you peregrine falcons to put in more effort. The man was terrified. His back was drenched in sweat. He said respectfully, Protecting your highness is the most important duty of the peregrine falcons. It is not troublesome at all. The man would undoubtedly respect the special identity of this young Lingzhou general, but he was even more afraid that he could directly call out the name of the head behind the peregrine falcons. Chu Lushan's fearsome abilities were all rumors. If one was not a peregrine falcon, they would not understand the terrifying abilities of the head of the Chu Lushan family. Su Fengnian walked around the desk to the man. He bent down to help him up. He laughed softly. Biyao has many civil and military officials. Compared to you, it is also 100 less. Without you, Biyao will be even more unstable. Help me pass a message to Chu Lushan. This year, tell him to reward all the peregrine falcons. He does not need to pay for this. Take it out from Mount Qingliang. If anyone wants secret manuals or similar things, they can boldly ask. The Wang Fu will try to satisfy them. In my opinion, there is nothing in the world that is more valuable than life. Since you have pawned your lives to the Su family, then the Su family has no reason to treat you badly. Chapter 921. After the man stood up, his eyes turned red. He hesitated for a moment, then scratched his head, feeling a little shy. He gathered his courage and said, I'm from Jinzhou, only 300 li away from the general's and your highness's hometown. However, I left Liaodong 6 or 7 years later than the general. I once mingled in another army, but I committed a crime and had no choice but to follow the general. All these years, I've been working for General Chu, and I haven't made any contributions. It's all hard work that anyone can do. A few years ago, I married a wife and gave birth to a few little girls. At the beginning of autumn, I finally had a boy with a handle. My family doesn't lack money, so I'd like to ask Your Highness to name my boy when you're free. If Your Highness is too busy, just pretend that I didn't say anything. Su Fengnian said softly, there are many things to pay attention to when choosing a name. If it's not chosen well, it will affect one's future luck. I believe in this very much, so I don't dare to name your son. The man didn't have much hope, so he wasn't disappointed. Su Fengnian suddenly smiled and said, but Su Xiao doesn't believe in this. When I go to Liangzhou, I'll ask Su Xiao to name your son. If it's not chosen well, or if it's unpleasant, you can use it as a nickname. The man was about to kneel again, but Su Fengnian grabbed his arm and said helplessly, all right, even if you kneel a few more times, I can't ask for a few more names for your son. Besides, your son doesn't need them. Names aren't money, so the more the better. The man smiled shyly. He no longer had his original shrewdness and caution, but rather a sincere and honest look. After you leave, send a message to Su Beiji in Longqing County and ask him to come to the general's mansion. After saying this, Su Fengnian walked to the window. The man, who was full of joy, didn't disturb His Royal Highness's thoughts and silently left the study. Su Fengnian gazed at the pot of impatience balsamine that Huyen Guanyin had sacrificed to bring over. The strength of Liang lay in the fact that after the unification of the Central Plains, the Grand Preceptor Sun Shiji, as the head of the civil officials, led a large group of old remnants of West Chu to pledge their allegiance to Liang. The dust had completely settled on the dust of the struggle for orthodoxy in the world. As long as the imperial court was willing to use talents, there was practically an inexhaustible supply. These talents all had their own specialties. Some were focused on writing moral articles and establishing their views. Some were pragmatic and buried in their work to render meritorious service. There were also a large number of people doing dirty and tiring work. If Liang was said to be a fertile land with tens of thousands of mu and qualified to bully customers in the taverns, then Beiliang was a small piece of land. His master, Li Shan, for so many years, could be said to be a clever housewife who couldn't cook without rice. Su Fengnian used to joke in private. Whether it was with Su Xiao or with his two sisters, he said that even if he could become the emperor, he would rather die than sit in the throne room. This was because he had long known how difficult it was to be in charge of a region. However, when he really began to personally set up the plan, he felt that even if he was the crown prince of Beiliang, if he wanted to do anything, he was still trapped in a square cage. The slightest movement would cause him to run into a wall. This cage was something painstakingly built by the people of each dynasty. Su Fengnian returned to the writing desk and picked up the brush to write down the loosely structured 3 words, only tell corpses. Then, he added a side note next to the word only tell corpses, completing the word weave. Putting down the brush, Su Fengnian put his hands in his sleeves and walked out of the study. He walked aimlessly through the corridors and buildings. At a small pavilion by the water, he bumped into Wang Lifting, who was jumping around to warm himself. This fellow, along with Li Hanlin, Wang Yunshu, and a young master who committed crimes in Amei County, were known as the 4 tyrants of Lingzhou. Not to mention Wang Shihua, who could not be underestimated, but compared to the lifeless Wang Zhenlu, the head of the Su of Gojouzian family, Su Fengnian was undoubtedly more interested in this new master of the purple gold Wang family, Wang Lifting. Because of the hereditary succession, Beiliang was now in an unavoidable era of turmoil. A new emperor would bring in new officials. Those who should have fallen had already fallen, and those who should have risen had yet to rise. Many families were following the general trend and moving around, but the timing was different. Zhong Hongwu, who was born into a noble family, let his only son, Zhong Qingxin, take the path of a civil official in order to seek change. Wang Shihua, who was already a famous scholar, let Wang Yunshu take the path of a military general in order to seek change. However, most of these people had good fathers, so they could get twice the result with half the effort. Su Fengnian only knew that the purple gold Wang family had not produced any great talents for several generations. He originally thought that Wang Lifting's generation would also fall into decline. He did not expect that this time, he would have the courage to come to the general's mansion. If he returned empty-handed, the first target to be dealt with by the administrator would definitely not be the two families of Wang Shihua and Wang Jinlu, but the purple gold Wang family, whose foundation was not stable. It could be imagined that the young Wang Lifting was shouldering a lot of pressure. Seeing His Royal Highness approaching, Wang Lifting just turned his head and smiled, continuing to jump and jump. Su Fengnian stood beside Wang Lifting. The latter opened his mouth and joked, knowing that Your Highness is a straightforward person, Lifting will speak bluntly. This time, I followed behind my two elders here to ask for a reward from Your Highness. I'm really cutting off all means of retreat. If I don't get an official position, when I return to Huangnam County, I will definitely be criticized by those old men behind my back. Your Highness, please do me a favor and take pity on Wang Lifting. Su Fengnian looked at the narrow ripples that were only slightly rippled within the rules, and calmly said, First, tell me what kind of official position you want. If it's too big, I can't afford it. If it's too small, I can't take it out. If I try to fool the purple gold Wang family, I will also be drowned in the spit of those old men behind my back. Wang Lifting laughed heartily and said, It's not big. Beiliang's Weaving Bureau only has this kind of official position. The two Weaving Bureau in Gangnam-do are fourth-rank positions. Our Beiliang's Golden Thread Weaving Bureau is only fifth rank. Anyway, the old weaver Li Shifeng has worked for 12 years. He should have retired long ago. Su Fengnian said calmly, fifth rank isn't small. Wang Lifting was indeed thick-skinned. He stopped jumping and exhaled a mouthful of smoke. He turned his head and looked at His Royal Highness with a bright smile. Lifting knew that it would be difficult to get an official position, so I have the intention to buy one from Your Highness. The purple gold Wang family is willing to take out 180,000 taels of silver, all in cash. If it's not enough, the family still has some rare antiques and calligraphy rubbing, which can be converted into silver. As long as Your Highness is generous, we can probably gather another 100,000 taels of silver. There's no other way. We can't be compared to the other three princes of Huangnam County. Our purple gold Wang family is poor. Su Fengnian sat on a long bench and gestured at Wang Lifting. The two of them sat facing each other. Su Fengnian smiled and said, I can sell you a golden thread weaving bureau for 180,000 taels of silver. However, there's an additional condition. Wang Lifting smiled and said, Your Highness, my sister is indeed famous for being virtuous. However, her beauty is only average. Furthermore, she has a matchmaker. Your Highness, please don't have this idea. Su Fengnian was stunned. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He smiled and said, Don't try to be glib with me. Let's be serious. I know that you have a good friend who comes from a poor family. He is a teacher in the purple gold Wang family. Yao Baifeng said that as long as this person is willing to take the imperial examinations and obtain scholarly honors, he will definitely become the top scorer of the Lingzhou imperial examinations, as well as the Huiyuan imperial examinations of the 8 prefectures. He might even become the Zhuangyuan imperial examinations of the 3 prefectures. This year, Liu Yuan of Huangnam County obtained the top 3 of the palace examinations and was bestowed with the title of Jinshi. It seems that he benefited from your friend's weaving techniques. Otherwise, he would only be able to pass the county examinations. Not to mention the palace examinations, even the metropolitan examinations would be an extravagant hope. If you can persuade this person to leave the mountain, I will let you become a golden thread weaving bureau. If you can't persuade him, then you will have to obediently return to the purple gold Wang family. Wang Lifting held his stomach and laughed loudly. Su Fengnian was indifferent. Wang Lifting stopped laughing and said with a cunning expression, Your Highness, please don't worry. This fellow has already been forcefully kidnapped by me and brought to the city. Should I call him over for Your Highness now? Su Fengnian shook his head and said, There's no need to meet him. Tell him to come to Lingzhou's capital after the new year. I have an official's hat to give to him for free. Wang Lifting sighed ruefully and said, Comparisons are odious. I still have to spend my entire fortune to buy an official's position. This fellow has it all. Su Fengnian suddenly said, you are neither the son of the first wife nor the eldest son. To be able to become the head of the purple gold Wang family, it must not have been easy. Wang Wolfting retracted his frivolous expression. However, he did not purposely sit upright and still. Instead, he said softly, compared to your highness, it is much easier. Su Fengnian laughed and said, you haven't even become an official yet and you are already bootlicking? Wang Wolfting laughed again, let's get familiar with each other first. Since I want to live under someone else's roof, how can I not look at his face? In the future, your highness should give Wang Wolfting more opportunities to flatter you. Su Fengnian joked, then you should first become Chu Lushan's disciple and learn from him. Wang Wolfting wanted to say something but stopped. Su Fengnian knew that he was a smart person and said directly, I know what you are thinking. Indeed, whether it is me or others, Chu Lushan's bootlicking has always been disgusting. However, there is one thing that many people don't see. Chu Lushan only treats one person this way. This is called being faithful to one person until death. Therefore, he and Administrator Li both, at this point, Su Fengnian paused for a moment and did not continue speaking. He stood up and left directly. Wang Wolfting, who had been secretly tense, did not think too deeply about the strange words at the end. After all, he had obtained everything he wanted on this trip and had even exceeded his expectations. At the same time, he felt as if a heavy burden had been lifted off his shoulders and he could not suppress his excitement. However, when he realized the meaning behind it, he felt a chill all over his body. Could it be that the owner of the neighboring mansion would also change his name as Biyao changed?